I inherited an abandoned beach cabin from my wife, and my son got the $5 million villa in Italy. He sneered at me and said, "Go live with the rats, old man," and kicked me out into the storm. I drove to that rotting shack just to have a place to sleep, but when I forced the rusted door open, I stopped breathing at what I saw inside. What I found under the floorboards changed everything and made me realize that my wife had been playing a game of chess while we were all playing checkers. I am Quincy Turner, 68 years old, and I spent 40 years of my life building bridges as a structural engineer. I built foundations that could withstand earthquakes and hurricanes, but I never realized that the foundation of my own family was built on quicksand. Just 3 days ago, I buried Etta, my wife of 40 years. She was the only person who truly knew me. She was a quiet woman, a retired school teacher who loved knitting and old jazz records. Or at least that is what I thought. I sat in the corner of the living room, the same living room where I had taught my son Jordan how to tie his shoes and where I had danced with Etta on our anniversaries. The funeral guests had just left, leaving behind the smell of stale coffee and overwhelming lilies. My joints were aching, a deep throbbing pain that always came with the rain, but the pain in my chest was far worse. I looked at Jordan, my son. He was 35 years old, a marketing director with a sharp suit and a soft grip. He was sitting on the leather sofa pouring himself a glass of my best scotch, not even using a coaster. Next to him sat Mackenzie, his wife. She was scrolling through her phone, her long manicured fingernails tapping aggressively against the screen. She did not look like a woman in mourning. She looked like someone waiting for a delayed flight. She sighed loudly and looked around the room with distinct distaste. "This place smells like old people," she said, wrinkling her nose. "Jordan, we need to get the cleaners in here first thing tomorrow, and maybe burn that rug. It smells like dust and dead dreams." "Mackenzie, please," I said, my voice raspy from days of silence. That rug was Etta's favorite. She brought it back from Morocco 20 years ago. Mackenzie rolled her eyes, not even bothering to look at me. "Well, Etta isn't here anymore, Quincy, and frankly, neither is her taste in decor. Jordan, tell him to stop being so sentimental. We have a schedule to keep. The lawyer is 5 minutes late, and I have a flight to book." Jordan took a sip of whiskey and finally looked at me. His eyes were cold, detached. "Just let it go, Dad. Mackenzie is stressed. It has been a long week for all of us. For all of us." I wanted to laugh, but I had no laughter left. They had spent the funeral taking selfies near the casket and complaining about the catering service. I had spent the funeral trying to remember how to breathe without Etta beside me. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you the most. The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. It was Mr. Abernathy, Etta's attorney. He was a man of few words with a face carved from granite. He walked in, shaking his umbrella off in the foyer, and looked at the three of us. He did not sit down. He stood by the fireplace, pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase, and cleared his throat. "I will make this brief," he said, his voice gravelly. "Mrs. Turner left very specific instructions regarding the division of her estate. She was of sound mind and body when she drafted this 6 months ago. 6 months ago. That was right after Jordan had missed his mother's birthday party because he was too busy at a networking event. I remember Etta sitting by the window that night, just smiling, a strange, sad smile." Mr. Abernathy began to read. "To my son, Jordan Turner, I leave the entirety of our liquid assets totaling $150,000 in the joint savings account. I also bequeath to you the Villa Rosa located in Tuscany, Italy." The room went silent for a second and then exploded. Mackenzie shrieked, jumping up from the sofa. "Tuscany! Oh my God, Jordan, did you hear that? A villa, a literal villa in Italy." Jordan's jaw dropped. He looked like he had just won the lottery. "I didn't even know Mom had property in Italy." He stammered, a greedy grin spreading across his face. "Is it big?" "It is a historic estate with 12 bedrooms and a private vineyard." Mr. Abernathy said, his tone flat. "The estimated market value is $5 million. $5 million. Mackenzie grabbed Jordan's arm, shaking him. "We are rich, baby. We are finally rich." I knew she was hiding something. I knew it. I sat there stunned. I knew Etta had family in Europe, distant cousins, but a villa. She had never mentioned a villa. "And to my husband, Quincy Turner," Mr. Abernathy continued, raising his voice slightly to be heard over Mackenzie's squeals, "I leave the property known as Lot 42 at Blackwater Bay." The room went quiet again. Jordan looked at me and then burst out laughing, a cruel barking sound. Lot 42. You mean that old shack by the swamp? Mom actually left you the rat cabin. Mr. Abernathy handed me a heavy iron key. It looked ancient, rusted, and cold. This is the only key, Mr. Turner. The deed is in your name, effective immediately. Jordan stood up, walking over to me with a smirk. Wow, Dad. Mom really had a sense of humor, didn't she? I get the vineyard and the millions, and you get a pile of rotting wood in the middle of nowhere. It is poetic, really. You always liked fixing broken things. I took the key. My hand was trembling. It wasn't about the money. It was about the message. Why would Etta do this? Why would she give everything to the son who ignored her and leave me with nothing but a ruin? Mr. Abernathy packed his briefcase. I have done my duty. The keys to the house we are currently standing in have been transferred to Jordan Turner as per the deed of the Villa Trust. This house is now considered an asset of the Italian estate. Good day. He walked out, leaving me alone with the sharks. Mackenzie stopped celebrating instantly. Her eyes narrowed as she processed the lawyer's words. Wait. If this house belongs to the estate and the estate belongs to Jordan, then this is our house now. She turned to me, her face twisting into a mask of cruelty. Well, Quincy, you heard the man. You have your own property now. Lot 42, right? Sounds charming. Jordan checked his watch. Look, Dad, we have a lot of planning to do. We need to liquidate this house to fund our move to Italy. And honestly, having you here sleeping on the couch while we try to pack, it is just not going to work. Are you kicking me out? I asked quietly, standing up. My knees popped. This house. I built this fireplace with my own hands, Jordan. I paid the mortgage on this place for 30 years, and Mom signed it over to me, Jordan said, shrugging. It is legal, Dad. Don't make this difficult. You have the truck right. Pack your stuff. Now, Mackenzie added, like right now. I don't want to see your old flannel shirts cluttering up my hallway tomorrow morning. I looked at my son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, the boy I had taught to ride a bike. He wouldn't even meet my gaze. He was too busy looking at photos of Tuscany on his phone, already mentally spending the money he hadn't earned. Fine, I said. My voice was steady now, fueled by a cold, burning anger I had never felt before. I will go. I walked to the bedroom. The master bedroom where I wasn't even allowed to sleep for the last 3 nights because Mackenzie said my snoring bothered her. I grabbed my old duffel bag. I packed 2 changes of clothes, my toothbrush, and the photo of Etta from the bedside table. When I walked back into the living room, Mackenzie was already measuring the windows for new curtains. She didn't look up. Jordan was pouring another drink. Goodbye, Dad, he said dismissively. Have fun with the rats. Send us a postcard if you get Wi-Fi out there in the swamp. I didn't say a word. I walked to the front door and opened it. The storm was raging outside. Rain lashed against the porch, soaking me instantly. Hey, Mackenzie yelled. Don't track mud out. I stepped onto the porch. Before the door clicked shut, I heard her laugh. Can you believe we almost got stuck taking care of him? Thank God for that villa. The door slammed shut. The sound echoed in my soul like a gunshot. I stood there in the pouring rain, clutching my duffel bag. My truck, a 20-year-old Ford pickup, was parked in the driveway. It was the only thing I owned now. That and a rusted key to a shack I hadn't seen in decades. I climbed into the truck. The engine sputtered and coughed before roaring to life. I wiped the water from my face, but I realized it wasn't just rain. I was crying, not out of sadness, but out of sheer disbelief. I backed out of the driveway, leaving behind the home I had built, the life I had known. I turned the headlights on, cutting through the darkness. The GPS said Blackwater Bay was 3 hours away. I drove through the night, the windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the storm. I had no money. My pension check went into the joint account which Jordan now controlled. I had no home. I had no family. But as I drove, a strange feeling began to settle over me. Etta was smart. She was the smartest woman I ever knew. She wouldn't just leave me to rot. There had to be a reason. Go live with the rats, Jordan had said. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. Okay, son. I will go live with the rats. But you better pray those rats don't bite back. I didn't know it then, but I wasn't driving toward an end. I was driving toward a beginning that would cost Jordan everything he thought he had won. The game had just begun, and it was my move. The windshield wipers were fighting a losing battle against the storm, slashing back and forth with a rhythmic screech that matched the pounding of my headache. I had been driving for 4 hours straight, staring into the abyss of the highway with nothing but the red taillights of semi-trucks to keep me company. My stomach gave a violent growl, reminding me that I had not eaten since breakfast before the funeral. The hunger was a sharp cramp that twisted my insides, but it was nothing compared to the humiliation burning in my chest. I saw a neon sign for a gas station flickering through the downpour and decided to pull over. My old Ford truck rattled as I navigated the potholed entrance. I needed gas and I needed coffee. Maybe a sandwich if they had one that did not look like plastic. I stepped out of the truck and the wind immediately slapped me in the face, soaking my funeral suit in seconds. I shivered, my arthritis flaring up in my knees and shoulders. It felt like someone was grinding glass into my joints with every step I took toward the brightly lit convenience store. Inside, the clerk barely looked up from his magazine. I grabbed a lukewarm coffee and a stale ham sandwich, then walked to the counter. I pulled out my debit card, the one attached to the joint account Etta and I had shared for 40 years. The same account Jordan now had access to as the executor of the estate. I swiped the card, declined. The machine beeped loudly. I frowned and wiped the chip on my wet jacket. "Try it again, please," I said to the clerk. "It must be the rain." He sighed and reset the machine. I inserted the card again. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Please work. Just let me have a sandwich." Declined. The clerk looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "It says card suspended by account holder buddy. Do you have cash?" My face went hot. I felt the blood rushing to my ears. Jordan. He had not just kicked me out. He had called the bank immediately. He had cut me off before I even made it to the county line. He wanted me to crawl. He wanted me to starve. I put the sandwich back on the counter. My hand was trembling and I hid it in my pocket. "No," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I left my wallet at home. I walked back out into the rain without the coffee, without the food, and with the fuel gauge hovering just above empty. I sat in the truck and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I was 68 years old. I had built bridges that connected cities. I had designed foundations for skyscrapers. And now I could not even buy a $3 sandwich. I had nowhere to go. No friends I could burden at this hour. No family who would take my side against the golden boy Jordan. The only place left was Lot 42, Blackwater Bay, the place Jordan had laughed at. Go live with the rats. I started the engine and merged back onto the highway. The hunger turned into a dull ache and the cold seeped into my bones, making my teeth chatter. I drove on, fueled only by a stubborn refusal to die on the side of the road. I would not give Jordan the satisfaction. I would sleep on the floor of that cabin if I had to. I would eat berries from the woods if I had to. But I would not turn back. The GPS finally told me to exit onto a narrow road that wound its way toward the coast. The asphalt gave way to gravel and then to mud. The truck slipped and slid, fighting for traction in the sludge. The trees on either side of the road grew thick and wild, their branches scraping against the roof of the cab like skeletal fingers trying to hold me back. This was not a road to a sanctuary. This was a road to nowhere. Finally, the headlights cut through the darkness and illuminated a wooden gate hanging off one hinge. I had arrived. I drove through the opening, the tires spinning in the wet grass, and parked in front of the structure. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, listening to the rain hammer on the metal roof. I was afraid to look. I was afraid that Jordan was right. I took a deep breath, grabbed my duffel bag, and stepped out into the mud. I shone my flashlight at the house, and my heart sank into my boots. It was hideous. It was worse than a ruin. It looked like a corpse of a house that had been left to rot for 20 years. The wood siding was gray and warped, peeling away from the frame like dead skin. The porch roof sagged dangerously in the middle, held up by a single rotting post. Every single window was boarded up with plywood that had turned black with mold. Weeds grew so high they reached the windowsills, choking the life out of the property. I walked closer, my boots making sucking sounds in the mud. The air smelled of salt and decay and wet wood. I shone the light up to the roof and saw missing shingles. There were probably leaks everywhere. The inside was likely a swimming pool of mold and rat droppings. Why Etta? Why I whispered into the storm? I felt a surge of bitterness I had never felt toward my wife before. Had she gone senile in her final months? Had she been swindled into buying this dump? She had called this a retreat. She had left me this instead of the millions because she said I liked fixing things. But this was not a fixer-upper. This was a demolition project. She gave Jordan a palace in Tuscany with vineyards and marble floors. She gave me a pile of wet lumber in a swamp. I felt like a fool. I had defended her in that living room. I had held on to her memory like a lifeline. But standing here in the freezing rain looking at this disaster, I felt betrayed. Maybe Jordan was right. Maybe she loved him more. Maybe I was just the old workhorse she kept around to pay the bills, and now that she was gone, she had put me out to pasture in a garbage dump. I walked up the creaky steps onto the porch. The wood felt soft and spongy under my feet. I tested my weight carefully, afraid I would crash right through to the crawl space below. I made it to the front door. It was a heavy, solid oak door, the only thing that looked like it might still have some integrity. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the heavy iron key Mr. Abernathy had given me. It was cold and rough in my hand. At least I would have a roof over my head tonight, even if that roof was leaking. I just needed to get inside, lay down my coat, and sleep until the sun came up. Then I would figure out how to sell this scrap heap for firewood and move into a shelter. I slid the key into the lock. It went in halfway and stopped. I jiggled it. Nothing. I pushed harder, trying to force it past the obstruction. It would not budge. I pulled it out and shone my flashlight directly into the keyhole. My blood ran cold. It wasn't rust. It was glue. Clear, hardened epoxy glue filled the keyhole. I ran my finger over it. It was smooth. This was not natural decay. This was not an accident. Someone had deliberately filled the lock with industrial-grade adhesive to prevent anyone from getting inside. I looked around the porch. There were scratches on the door frame, deep gouges where someone had tried to pry it open before and failed. A sudden wave of adrenaline washed away my fatigue. My engineer brain kicked into gear. This wasn't just an abandoned shack. Someone was trying very hard to keep people out. You don't glue the locks of a worthless ruin. You only secure things that have value, or secrets. I wasn't going to sleep in the truck. Not tonight. I walked back to my pickup and opened the toolbox in the bed. I grabbed my heavy-duty crowbar, the one I used to pry apart concrete forms. I marched back to the porch, ignoring the pain in my knees. The anger I felt toward Jordan, toward the bank, toward the storm, it all focused into a single point of energy in my arms. I wedged the flat end of the crowbar between the door frame and the heavy oak door. I hammered it in with the palm of my hand until it bit deep into the wood. I braced my foot against the wall and pulled. The wood groaned. It was a loud, dry crack that sounded like a gunshot in the night. I pulled harder, putting all my weight, all my frustration, all my grief into the lever. The veins in my neck bulged. I screamed a guttural roar of effort. Crack. The frame splintered. The glued lock held firm, but the wood around it gave way. With one final mighty heave, the heavy door swung inward, crashing against the inside wall with a deafening boom. I stood there panting, my chest heaving, clutching the crowbar like a weapon. I waited for the smell of rats. I waited for the stench of mold. I pointed my flashlight into the darkness, prepared to see a disaster zone. But the air that drifted out from the darkness was not stale. It was dry. It was cool. And it smelled of cedar and lemon polish. I stepped across the threshold, and what I saw made me drop the crowbar. The metal clattered on the floor, but it didn't hit rotting wood. It hit polished marble. I stepped across the threshold, preparing to fight off a colony of rats or hold my breath against the stench of black mold. But the air that hit my face was not damp or decaying. It was warm and dry and smelled faintly of lavender and polished cedar. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind me, cutting off the howling wind and the driving rain as if a soundproof barrier had been dropped. Silence, absolute and heavy, filled the space. I blinked, trying to adjust my eyes to the darkness, but before I could reach for my flashlight, a soft amber glow began to illuminate the room. Motion sensor lights hidden in the crown molding flickered to life, revealing a sight that made my knees buckle. I dropped my duffel bag and it landed on the floor with a dull thud. I was not standing on rotting wooden planks. I was standing on pristine Italian marble tiles veined with gold and cream that felt warm beneath my soaking wet boots. This was not a cabin. This was a masterpiece of deception. I walked further into the room, my mouth hanging open. The exterior was a perfect camouflage of rotting wood and peeling paint, but the interior was a sanctuary of modern Nordic design. The walls were paneled in honey-colored teak wood that glowed under the recessed lighting. To my right was a kitchen that would have made a Michelin star chef jealous. A massive granite island dominated the space, surrounded by stainless steel appliances that looked brand new. There was a wine fridge, a double oven, and an espresso machine that probably cost more than my truck. I walked over to the living area. A floor-to-ceiling glass wall looked out over the bay, but it was fitted with heavy storm shutters that were currently closed, concealing the luxury inside from the outside world. In the center of the room sat a leather sectional sofa, the color of cognac, soft and inviting. A fireplace made of river stone took up the entire far wall, and with a soft click of a thermostat, I had not even touched gas. Flames erupted behind the glass screen, instantly filling the room with a cozy heat that began to thaw my frozen bones. There were no rats here. There were no cobwebs. There was not a speck of dust. It was as if a team of cleaners had just left 5 minutes ago. I ran my hand along the back of the sofa, feeling the expensive grain of the leather. Etta, my sweet, simple Etta, who bought her clothes at discount stores and clipped coupons every Sunday. She had built this. She had hidden this. Why? The question hammered in my brain. Why did she let me believe we were just getting by on my pension and her savings? Why did she let Jordan treat us like we were burdens? I wandered into the kitchen, my footsteps echoing softly on the marble. On the granite island, sitting alone in the center of the vast, empty surface, was a thick, cream-colored envelope. My name was written on the front in elegant, cursive ink. Quincy. My heart hammered against my ribs as I reached for it. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The paper felt heavy and expensive. I tore open the seal and pulled out 3 pages of handwritten text. The date at the top was from 6 months ago, the day after she had been diagnosed with the illness that eventually took her. My dearest Quincy, the letter began. If you are reading this letter, it means 2 things have happened. First, it means I am gone and you are missing me. I am sorry to leave you, my love. But secondly, and more importantly, it means that you are standing inside Lot 42 while our son Jordan is on a plane to Italy. I had to sit down. I pulled one of the heavy velvet bar stools out and collapsed onto it, reading greedily. I know you are confused, Quincy. You are wondering why I left the villa to Jordan and this shack to you. You are probably angry. You probably think I have gone senile. But listen to me closely. I did not leave the villa to Jordan because I love him more. I left it to him because I know who he has become. I know he has forgotten the values we taught him. I know he married a woman who loves his wallet more than his heart, and I knew that the moment I was gone, they would treat you like furniture that no longer matches the decor. I gasped. A tear landed on the paper, blurring the ink of the word decor. She knew. She had predicted every single moment of this evening. I knew Jordan would not let you live in the main house. The letter continued. I knew Mackenzie would want you out, and I knew that Jordan, being the arrogant man he has become, would look at the exterior of this cabin and see only trash. He would see a rat hole. He would mock you. He would kick you out with nothing. And that, Quincy, is exactly what I needed him to do, because if he knew what was inside this cabin, he would have taken it from you too. He would have sold it to buy a sports car or a yacht and left you on the street. I wiped my eyes. She had built a fortress disguised as a ruin to protect me from our own son. This cabin is yours, Quincy. It is your safety. It is your reward for 40 years of hard work and unconditional love. But this is just the surface. You need to see the rest. Go to the living room. Look for the bearskin rug in front of the fireplace. Move it aside. I looked up from the letter, staring at the massive faux fur rug in front of the roaring fire. Trust me, Quincy. The letter ended. The game is just beginning. Love always, Etta. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. A strange sensation was rising in my chest, replacing the grief and the humiliation. It was a spark of excitement. I walked over to the rug. It was heavy, thick, and luxurious. I grabbed the edge and pulled it back, revealing the hardwood floor beneath. Except it wasn't just floor. Embedded in the floorboards was a square steel hatch about 3 feet wide. It looked like the entrance to a bank vault, seamlessly integrated into the wood. There was no handle. There was no keyhole. There was only a small black glass panel next to the seam. I knelt down my knees, protesting slightly, but I barely felt the pain. I touched the black panel. It lit up with a soft blue light, displaying the outline of a handprint. A biometric scanner. I stared at my own rough, calloused hand. The hand of a man who had built bridges and poured concrete. Had Etta really programmed this system for me? I placed my right hand onto the cool glass. A beam of blue light scanned across my palm. I held my breath. Beep. The light turned green. A heavy mechanical thunk echoed from deep within the floor, followed by the hiss of hydraulics. The steel hatch rose slowly, revealing a set of illuminated concrete stairs leading down into the earth. I stood up, staring into the abyss. This was insane. My wife was a schoolteacher. She graded papers. She baked apple pies. She did not build secret bunkers with biometric locks. I walked down the stairs. The air got cooler, controlled, and filtered. At the bottom, the lights flared on, automatically revealing a room that looked like a cross between a library and a command center. Rows of climate-controlled wine racks lined the walls, filled with bottles that looked dusty and ancient. I knew nothing about wine, but even I could tell these were not from the grocery store. In the center of the room sat a heavy mahogany desk with a high-back leather chair. On the desk sat a sleek laptop and a large steel safe. I walked over to the desk. The safe door was already slightly ajar, as if inviting me in. Inside, I saw stacks of documents bound in leather folders. I pulled one out. The cover read Blackwater Land Trust Deeds and Acquisition Records. I opened it. My eyes scanned the legal jargon and the maps. This wasn't just about the cabin. The map showed the entire bay. Red lines crisscrossed the area, marking plots of land. And right in the center, holding everything together like the keystone of a bridge, was Lot 42. My phone buzzed in my pocket, shattering the silence. The sound was so jarring I nearly dropped the folder. I pulled it out. The screen lit up with a photo of Jordan smiling a fake smile. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to throw the phone against the wall, but another part of me, the part that had just read Eda's letter, felt a surge of cold confidence. I answered. Dad Jordan's voice was loud and distorted by background noise. He sounded out of breath and furious. "Where are you?" "I am at the cabin," I said, my voice steady and calm. "Why?" "Listen, you need to fix this," he snapped. "We are at the airport lounge. I just tried to pay for our upgrade to first class and the card got declined. The attendant said the account is frozen or restricted." "Did you mess with the bank?" I almost laughed. He had kicked me out, cut off my access to money, and now he was calling me because his champagne dreams were hitting a snag. "I didn't touch anything, Jordan," I said, leaning back against the mahogany desk. "I am just an old man living with the rats, remember? I don't have access to the accounts." "You made sure of that." "Well, call the bank," Jordan yelled. "You are still a secondary holder on some of the old files. Tell them to authorize the charge." "This is embarrassing, Dad." Mackenzie is screaming at the manager. "We need to get to Italy." I looked around the room. I looked at the wine collection that was likely worth more than his annual salary. I looked at the deeds that held secrets he could not even imagine. "I can't help you, son," I said. "My wallet is empty, my stomach is empty, and I am busy trying to keep dry. You are the executor. You figure it out. Dad, do not hang up on me. If I get to Italy and find out you—" I ended the call. I didn't just hang up, I turned the phone off completely. The silence returned, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. I looked at the safe again. There was another shelf inside below the documents. I reached in and pulled out a bottle of wine. It was a Chateau Margaux 1982. I had no idea what it tasted like, but I knew tonight was the night to find out. I sat down in the leather chair, the chair that must have been Eda's throne for years. I spun around, slowly taking it all in. Jordan was stuck at the airport, arguing over an upgrade. He was flying toward a trap Eda had set for him, and I was sitting in the heart of her real legacy. I reached for the laptop on the desk and opened it. A sticky note was attached to the screen. "Password is our anniversary, Eda's handwriting." I typed in the numbers. The screen came to life, and as the files began to load, I realized that the cabin was not just a shelter. It was a weapon, and I was about to learn how to fire it. I pulled a thick leather binder from the safe, and the title on the spine sent a shiver down my spine. It read, Project Vengeance Italy. I opened it, and my breath caught in my throat. Eda had not just been a school teacher. She had been a ghost, a phantom investor who moved through the real estate market with a brilliance that terrified me. The documents in front of me told a story that was decades in the making. She had purchased the Villa Rosa in Tuscany 10 years ago, but she had not bought it for $5 million. She had bought it for exactly €1. It was part of an Italian heritage program where the government sold historic properties for pennies on the condition that the owner restore them to their original glory within a specific time frame. If the restoration was not completed, the penalties were astronomical. I flipped through the pages. Etta had done the bare minimum to keep the title, but she had let the restoration deadlines pass one by one. She had allowed the fines to accumulate. She had allowed the structural integrity taxes to pile up. And according to the final letter from the Italian Ministry of Culture, the property was now classified as a hazard. The owner was liable for immediate payment of back taxes and preservation fees totaling 2.1 million euros. I sat back in the heavy leather chair and stared at the ceiling. Etta had known. She had known Jordan's greed would blind him. She knew he would see the word villa and hear the word millionaire and stop thinking. He had walked right into a financial bear trap, and Etta had been the one to bait it. She had left him an asset that was actually a bomb. The safe contained more than just the Italian disaster. There were deeds to commercial lots in downtown Seattle. There were shares in tech startups I had never even heard of. My wife was not just comfortable. She was wealthy beyond my wildest imagination. But she had lived simply. She had driven a 10-year-old sedan. She had clipped coupons. She did it because she knew that money changes people. She had watched Jordan grow into a man who valued price tags over people, and she had decided to protect her legacy from him. I took a sip of the vintage wine. It tasted like velvet and smoke. For the first time in my life, I realized I was married to a stranger, a brilliant, dangerous, beautiful stranger who loved me enough to build me a bunker and teach our son a lesson from beyond the grave. Thousands of miles away across the Atlantic Ocean, the sun was rising over the rolling hills of Tuscany. I could picture it clearly because I was holding the surveillance report Etta had commissioned just weeks before she died. Jordan and Mackenzie would be pulling up to the iron gates of the Villa Rosa right about now. They would be exhausted from the flight, but running on pure adrenaline and greed. They would see the cypress trees lining the driveway. They would see the terracotta roof glowing in the morning light. Mackenzie would already be live streaming on her phone, telling her followers about her new life as an Italian countess. Jordan would be mentally calculating how much he could rent the place out for during the summer. But as their rental car approached the gate, they would not find a welcoming committee of servants. They would find a blockade. 2 blue and white police cars belonging to the Carabinieri would be parked across the entrance. A black government sedan would be waiting. Men in sharp uniforms with grim faces would be standing by the gate holding clipboards, not keys. Jordan would honk the horn. He would lean out the window and shout that he was the owner. He would wave the papers Mr. Abernathy had given him, and that is when the trap would snap shut. The officer in charge would not bow. He would step forward and ask for identification. He would take Jordan's passport and Mackenzie's passport. He would inform them that the property was under seizure by the state. He would explain in broken but firm English that as the new legal owner, Jordan Turner had just inherited a historic debt. I could imagine Mackenzie's scream. It would not be a scream of joy. It would be the sound of a woman realizing her golden ticket was actually a subpoena. She would look at the villa and finally see the cracks in the stucco. She would see the warning tape wrapped around the columns. She would see that the vineyard was overgrown and dead. They would try to leave. Jordan would try to get back in the car and drive away to run back to the airport, but the police would block them. In Italy, tax evasion on heritage sites is a criminal offense. They would not be allowed to leave the country until a payment plan was established or a significant deposit was made. They were not just broke. They were hostages to their own inheritance. My phone buzzed again on the mahogany desk. It danced across the wood, vibrating with panic. It was Jordan. I let it ring for a moment, swirling the red wine in my glass. I looked at the security monitors on the wall. The sun was setting over Blackwater Bay, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. My cabin, or my rat hole as Jordan called it, was safe. It was warm. It was paid for. I picked up the phone. "Hello, Jordan," I said, my voice calm. "Dad, thank God you answered." Jordan was hyperventilating. I could hear shouting in the background. I could hear Mackenzie sobbing hysterically. "Dad, you have to help us. It is a nightmare. This place is a ruin. The police are here. They took our passports, Dad. They say we owe 2 million euros. 2 million. I took a slow breath. "I am sorry to hear that, son. That sounds very stressful." "Stressful. It is not stressful. It is a catastrophe. Mom set us up. She knew about this. She has to have money hidden somewhere, Dad. You have to check the house. Look under the mattress. Look in her old jewelry boxes. There has to be cash. You need to wire us everything you find, right now." I looked at the safe in front of me. I looked at the bearer bonds and the stock certificates stacked neatly on the shelf. There was enough money in this room to pay off his debt twice over and still buy a private island. But I remembered the rain. I remembered the way he looked at me when he kicked me out. I remembered him laughing about the rats. I leaned back in my chair. Jordan. I am sitting in a shack in the middle of a swamp. The wind is howling through the walls. I don't have any money. You froze the accounts, remember? You took everything. Unfreeze them, Jordan screamed. Call the bank. Tell them it was a mistake. We need bail money. We need a lawyer. Mackenzie is having a panic attack. She says she's going to sue me. That sounds like a problem for a millionaire, I said coldly. You wanted the villa, Jordan. You wanted the prestige. You laughed at my little cabin. Well, now you have your palace. Enjoy it. Dad, please. You can't leave us here. We are family. Family. I repeated the word, tasting bitter in my mouth. Family is the people who give you a place to sleep when it is storming. Family is the people who don't call their father a burden. You made your choice, Jordan. You chose the villa. But I didn't know about the debt, he wailed, and I didn't know about the rats, I lied smoothly. But we all have to live with our inheritance, don't we? I am going to fix this, Jordan stammered, his voice cracking. When I get back, I am going to sell that cabin of yours. I am going to sell the land. I will get my money one way or another. I looked at the deed to Lot 42 sitting on the desk. The paper was yellowed, but the stamp was fresh. He couldn't sell it. He couldn't touch it. Etta had locked this land up so tight that God himself couldn't evict me. You can try, son, I said, but I think you will find that the rats here are bigger than you think, and they bite. I hung up the phone. This time I blocked the number. I finished my wine and stood up. The game had entered the second phase. Jordan was trapped in Europe, but he would find a way back. He was desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. But he didn't know that he wasn't just fighting a lonely old man anymore. He was fighting the combined force of Quincy Turner, structural engineer, and Etta Turner, financial mastermind. I walked up the stairs out of the bunker and into the warm living room. I looked out at the dark waters of the bay. Somewhere out there across the mud and the reeds, a massive resort was trying to expand, and they needed my land. They needed my rat hole. Tomorrow, I would not be the victim. Tomorrow, I would be the shark. The sun had barely risen over Blackwater Bay, painting the mudflats in shades of gray and bruised purple. I was sitting at the granite island in the kitchen drinking espresso from a machine that cost more than my first car. I felt like an imposter in my own home. Downstairs in the bunker lay a fortune in assets, but upstairs, looking out the peephole of the front door, I was just an old man in a rotting shack. A heavy fist pounded on the door. It was not a polite knock. It was the knock of someone who believed they owned the place and was annoyed that the lock was still holding. I checked the security monitor hidden in the kitchen cabinet. Standing on my porch was a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory for corporate sharks. He was wearing a charcoal suit that cost $2,000 and Italian loafers that were currently being ruined by the muck on my porch. He held a clipboard in one hand and was tapping his foot impatiently. I stepped out onto the porch, pulling the heavy oak door shut behind me quickly. I could not let him see the marble floors or the recessed lighting. To him, I had to remain the squatter living in filth. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice rough from sleep. The man spun around. He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my worn flannel shirt and my gray stubble. He sneered, a distinct curl of the lip that reminded me of Jordan. Finally, he said, "I thought you were dead in there. Or maybe just passed out. I am Mr. Sterling from Omnicorp Development." He did not offer his hand. He did not ask my name. He simply assumed I was nobody. "I am listening," I said, crossing my arms over my chest. Mr. Sterling sighed as if speaking to me was a great burden on his schedule. "Look, old-timer, let us cut to the chase. This structure is a hazard. It is condemned. The county is going to bulldoze it within the month. You are squatting here illegally, I assume. Or maybe you are some distant relative of the deceased owner. Either way, you cannot stay here. I am the owner," I said quietly. Sterling laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Sure you are. And I am the King of England. Look, I am authorized to make you a one-time humanitarian offer. We want to clean up this bay. We want to remove this eyesore before it collapses and kills someone." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He scribbled something quickly and ripped the page out, holding it toward me with 2 fingers like he was feeding a stray dog. $50,000, he said. Cash. Today. You take this, you sign the quitclaim deed, and you walk away. You can go buy yourself a nice trailer somewhere dry, somewhere far away from here. I looked at the check. $50,000. To a poor man, it was a fortune. To the man who had just seen the contents of Etta's safe, it was an insult. And if I refuse, I asked. Sterling stepped closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and aggression. If you refuse, we call the health department, we call the building inspector, we call the police. We will find code violations in this pile of junk that you cannot even pronounce. We will bury you in fines until you beg us to take it for free. Do not be stupid, old man. Take the money and run. My hands clenched into fists. I wanted to tell him about the steel-reinforced bunker beneath his feet. I wanted to tell him that this pile of junk was worth more than his life. But before I could speak, an engine roared to life behind him. A beat-up Ford Econoline van, rusted and painted with fading flames, screeched into the driveway, blocking Sterling's shiny sedan. The side door flew open and a young man jumped out. He was massive. He had to be 6'4", with broad shoulders and dreadlocks tied back in a thick bundle. He wore a ripped tank top that showed off arms covered in tattoos, and he looked like he had eaten nails for breakfast. He stomped through the mud, his boots splashing dirty water onto Sterling's pristine trousers. "Hey!" the young man shouted, his voice deep and booming. "Who is bothering my Uncle Quincy?" I blinked. I had never seen this kid in my life. Sterling took a step back, his arrogance faltering in the face of raw physical intimidation. "I am just conducting business here," he stammered. "Business?" the kid growled, stepping up onto the porch. He towered over Sterling. "You are trespassing. That is what you are doing. I told you vultures last week to stay away from my family. Did I stutter, or are you deaf?" Sterling looked at me, then back at the giant standing next to me. He swallowed hard. I did not know he had family. The report said... "The report is wrong," the kid snapped. He cracked his knuckles loudly. "Now get in your little toy car and get out of here before I decide to help you leave." Sterling put the checkbook away, his hands shaking slightly. "You are making a mistake," he hissed at me. "The offer expires at sundown. Next time I come back, I am bringing the sheriff." He scurried off the porch, slipping in the mud as he ran to his car. He peeled out of the driveway, throwing gravel everywhere in his haste to escape. We stood there watching him go until his taillights disappeared around the bend. The silence returned to the bay, broken only by the cry of a seagull. The young man turned to me. His menacing scowl vanished instantly, replaced by a bright, boyish grin. He extended a hand. "Hi, I am Leo. I live in the van down the road. Sorry about the Uncle Quincy thing. It seemed like the fastest way to get rid of the parasite." I shook his hand. His grip was firm and honest. "Thank you, Leo. I am Quincy, and you have pretty good timing," Leo laughed, leaning against the railing. "I have been watching that guy circle for 3 days. He is persistent, I will give him that. But he is terrified of anything he cannot buy or sue." "Why did you help me?" I asked. "You do not know me." Leo shrugged, looking out at the water. "My grandma raised me. She taught me to respect my elders, and she taught me to hate guys in suits who try to steal land. Plus, I saw you prying that door open last night in the storm. You looked like you were having a rough night. Figured you could use a win." I looked at this kid living in a van with holes in his shirt and realized he had more integrity in his little finger than my son had in his whole body. "Come inside," I said. "Let me make you a coffee. Real coffee, not the instant stuff." Leo hesitated, looking at the rotting exterior of the house. Sure, Mr. Quincy. Just warn me if the floor is going to cave in, okay?" I smiled. "Trust me, Leo. The floor is solid." When Leo walked inside, his reaction was even better than mine had been. He dropped his sunglasses. He spun around in circles, touching the marble walls, staring at the high-tech kitchen. "Dude," he whispered, This is like a villain's lair, or a billionaire's hideout. What is going on? I thought this place was a dump." "It is a disguise," I said, pouring him a cup of espresso. "My wife was a very clever woman." Leo took the coffee, sipping it cautiously. "Clever is an understatement. This is genius. No wonder Omnicorp is sweating." "Omnicorp?" I asked. "That is who that man worked for. Who are they?" Leo put the cup down his face, turning serious. "You do not know. Mr. Quincy, look at the map." He pulled a crumpled flyer from his back pocket and smoothed it out on the granite island. It was a promotional map for something called the Azure Coast Resort. It showed a massive, sprawling complex of five-star hotels, golf courses, and private marinas. It covered the entire bay, except for one spot. Right in the middle of the luxury development, right where the main access road to the private beach needed to go there, was a small gray square. "That is Lot 42, Leo said, tapping the gray square. "That is your house." He traced the lines with his finger. Omnicorp bought the old cannery to the north. They bought the wetlands to the south. They bribed the city council to rezone the forest behind us. They have sunk $500 million into this project. They have investors from Dubai and Shanghai waiting for the grand opening next year. "But they have a problem," I said, realizing the truth. "A big problem." Leo nodded. "They cannot build the road to the beach without your land. If they go around, it crosses into protected marshland, which takes 10 years to get a permit for. If they go the other way, they hit bedrock. You are the only way through." I looked at the map. I looked at the gray square that represented my home. "That explains the $50,000, I said. "They are trying to steal it before I know what it is worth." "50,000, Leo scoffed. "Mr. Quincy? They offered the old lady down the road $200,000 for her trailer and she took it. Your land is the keystone. Without this lot, their $500 million resort is just a really expensive hotel with a view of a swamp." I walked over to the window and opened the heavy shutters just a crack. I looked out at the muddy driveway where Mr. Sterling had stood. "They are desperate," I whispered. Leo nodded. "They are desperate and they are dangerous. That guy Sterling is just the messenger. When he tells his bosses you refused, they are going to come harder. They will try everything. Intimidation, legal threats, maybe even worse." I thought about the safe downstairs. I thought about the files Etta had kept. She had known all of this. She had bought this land 30 years ago, probably for pennies, knowing that one day the city would expand this way. She had sat on this gold mine, waiting for the right moment, and she had left it to me. "Let them come," I said, turning back to Leo. "I have spent my whole life pouring concrete and building foundations, Leo. I know how to hold my ground." Leo grinned, picking up his coffee again. "Well, if you need backup, I am right next door. I do not have much, but I have a tire iron, and I am not afraid of rich guys and loafers." We stood there, two strangers united by a common enemy, drinking expensive coffee in a secret bunker. Jordan thought he had won the lottery with his villa. He did not realize that the real treasure was buried in the mud of Blackwater Bay. And unlike him, I was not going to sell out. I was going to make them pay for every single inch. But I knew Leo was right. The vultures were circling, and soon they would stop asking politely and start attacking. I needed to be ready. I needed to check the rest of Etta's files, because if I was going to fight a corporation, I needed more than just a crowbar. I needed ammunition. 3 days passed before the silence of Blackwater Bay was broken again. I was sitting on the porch drinking a cup of chamomile tea and watching the fog roll off the water. It was peaceful, the kind of peace that settles deep in your bones when you finally realize you are safe. But peace never lasts long when you have vultures in the family. A yellow taxicab crunched down the gravel driveway, its suspension groaning under the weight of too much luggage. It was not a limousine. It was not a luxury sedan. It was a beat-up city cab with a dented fender. I watched as it stopped in front of the cabin. The back doors flew open and 2 people stumbled out. They looked like they had been through a war. Jordan was wearing the same suit he had worn to the funeral, but now it was wrinkled and stained with what looked like red wine and sweat. His tie was missing and his expensive Italian loafers were scuffed. Mackenzie looked even worse. Her hair, usually sprayed into a perfect helmet, was a frizzy mess. Her designer sunglasses were missing a lens. They were shouting at the taxi driver. I could hear Jordan's voice cracking with desperation. "I told you the card would work," he yelled, slamming his hand on the roof of the cab. "Just run it again." "It is declined, sir," the driver shouted back, stepping out of the car. He was a big man with thick arms. "You owe me $200 for the ride from the airport. Cash, or I call the cops." I watched from the shadows of the porch. My son, the millionaire. My son, the owner of a Tuscan villa, could not even pay a cab fare. Jordan patted his pockets frantically. Mackenzie was sobbing, digging through her purse, throwing lipstick and receipts onto the muddy ground. "We do not have cash," she wailed. "The Italian police took everything. They froze the accounts, Jordan. Do something. I could have gone inside. I could have locked the door and pretended I was not home. But I wanted to see this. I needed to see this." I walked down the steps slowly, my boots crunching on the gravel. Problems with the liquidity. I asked, my voice calm and low. They both froze. They spun around to look at me. For a second, I saw relief in Jordan's eyes. Then I saw the shame. And finally, the anger returned. "Dad," he gasped. "Dad, pay the man, please. They are going to arrest us. Again." I looked at the driver. I pulled a roll of bills from my pocket money I had taken from the safe just for emergencies like this. I peeled off $200 and handed it to the driver. "Keep the change," I said, "and get off my land." The driver snatched the money, glared at Jordan, and sped away, leaving a cloud of exhaust fumes. We stood there in the driveway. The silence was thick. Jordan did not say thank you. He just slumped his shoulders. Mackenzie wiped her nose on her sleeve, something I never thought I would see her do. "Well," I said, turning back to the house, "I suppose you better come in." I walked up the stairs knowing exactly what was about to happen. They followed me, dragging their suitcases through the mud. They were expecting a shack. They were expecting the rat hole they had laughed about. I opened the heavy oak door and stepped inside, holding it open for them. Jordan stepped in first, muttering complaints about the smell of the swamp. Then he stopped dead. His suitcase dropped from his hand and hit the floor with a loud thud. Mackenzie walked into his back and started to complain, but her words died in her throat. They stood there staring. Their eyes went wide, taking in the honey-colored teak walls, the marble floors, the blazing gas fireplace, and the massive glass wall looking out over the bay. They looked at the kitchen with its granite island and the professional-grade appliances. They looked at the artwork on the walls, originals that Etta had collected over decades. "This is not a shack," Jordan whispered. His voice was trembling. This is a palace." Mackenzie pushed past him, her fatigue forgotten. She walked into the living room, running her hands over the leather sofa. She touched the crystal vase on the mantel. She spun around, looking at the recessed lighting. "Oh my God," she breathed. "It is beautiful. It is modern. Jordan, look at this kitchen. It is better than the one we have in the city." She turned to me, and the transformation was instantaneous and sickening. Her face shifted from a scowl to a beaming smile. Her voice pitched up an octave, becoming sweet and cloying. "Oh, Quincy," she said, rushing over to me and grabbing my arm. "I knew it. I just knew Etta would never leave you in a bad place. This is stunning. It is so cozy. It has such wonderful energy. 5 minutes ago, I was an old man living with rats. Now that she saw the marble, I was suddenly family again." I pulled my arm away gently, but firmly. "It is comfortable," I said. "Comfortable," Jordan said, walking deeper into the room. "Dad, this place is worth a fortune. The finishings alone, the location. Why did Mom hide this? Why did she let us think it was a dump?" "Maybe she wanted to see who would love it for what it was," I said, looking him in the eye, "instead of what it was worth." Jordan ignored the jab. He was already calculating. I could see the wheels turning in his head. The greed was pushing out the shame. He walked over to the window, looking out at the bay. "We can fix this," he muttered to himself. "We can actually fix this." He turned back to me, his demeanor shifting. He straightened his jacket, trying to regain the authority he had lost. "Okay, Dad, listen, we have had a rough couple of days. Italy was a disaster, a total misunderstanding. The bureaucracy over there is insane. We had to leave in a hurry." "You mean you ran away?" I corrected him. "Because you owe 2 million euros in taxes." Jordan flinched. "Who told you that?" "It does not matter," I said, walking over to the kitchen island. "What matters is that you are here and you are broke." "We are not broke," Jordan snapped, his face turning red. "We are just illiquid. That is why we are here, Dad. We need to talk about the estate." Mackenzie chimed in, walking over to the espresso machine and helping herself to a cup without asking. "Quincy, darling, we were thinking. You know how much we worry about you, living out here all alone. It is not safe. What if you fall? What if you have a heart attack?" "I am perfectly fine, Mackenzie," I said. "But for how long?" Jordan interrupted. He walked over to the island, placing his hands flat on the granite. He leaned in, trying to intimidate me. "Dad, let us be real. You are 68. You are tired. You do not need a place like this. The maintenance alone will kill you." I sipped my tea. "Get to the point, Jordan." "The point is, we are in a crisis," Jordan said. "And this property is the solution. We need to sell it, Dad." I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "Sell it. You just got here. You just saw it, and you want to sell it. We have to." Jordan insisted, slamming his hand on the counter. "We need the cash to pay off the Italian debt so I can get my passport back. Once we clear that up, we can sell the villa for 5 million and we will all be rich. But we need bridge capital. This place, this cabin is the bridge capital. And where do I live? I asked. Mackenzie smiled that fake shark smile again. Oh, Quincy, we have it all figured out. There is a lovely assisted living facility near the city. We drove past it. It has a garden and bingo nights. You would love it. It is so social. So you want to take my home, sell it to pay for your mistakes, and put me in a nursing home, I summarized. It is for your own good, Jordan said, his voice rising. You cannot handle this, Dad. Etta made a mistake giving this to you. She probably wasn't thinking clearly at the end. She would want us to be together. She would want to save the family fortune. The family fortune is gone, Jordan, I said, my voice hardening. You spent it on first-class tickets and arrogance. This house is mine. Etta left it to me, and I am not selling. Jordan's face darkened. The desperation took over. He took a step closer to me, towering over me. You do not have a choice, Dad. Excuse me, I said, putting my cup down. I am the executor of the estate, Jordan spat, and I am your next of kin. If you do not cooperate, I will have no choice but to take legal action. Legal action, I repeated. You are going to sue your own father. I will petition the court for a conservatorship, Jordan said. His eyes were cold, dead things. I will testify that you are mentally incompetent. I will tell the judge that you are grieving, that you are delusional, that you are living in a fantasy world. Mackenzie will back me up. We will tell them you are a danger to yourself. I stared at him. This was the boy I had taught to fish. This was the boy I had held when he scraped his knee. And now he was standing in my kitchen threatening to declare me insane so he could steal my home. You would do that, I whispered. You would really do that. Do not push me, Dad, Jordan hissed. I am desperate, and I will not let a senile old man ruin my future. Sign the papers, Dad. Let me manage this property. Or, I promise you, the court will force you to do it, and you will end up in a state-run facility instead of a private one. I looked at Mackenzie. She was sipping her espresso, watching us with a bored expression as if we were discussing the weather. She did not care. Neither of them cared. I felt something break inside me. It wasn't my heart. It was the last chain of obligation I felt toward them. Get out, I said. Jordan blinked. What? Get out of my house, I said louder. This is not your house, Jordan shouted. It is a family asset, and I am taking control. I reached under the counter and pressed the silent alarm button Etta had installed. It connected directly to the private security firm she had hired years ago. You have 5 minutes before security arrives, I said. And Jordan, if you ever threaten me again, if you ever try to call me crazy again, I will show you exactly how sane I am. Jordan laughed. Security? You think you have security? You are a broke old man. Just then, blue lights flashed through the front window. A siren chirped. Not the police. Private security. Leo had told me they patrolled the area, but I didn't know they were this fast. Or maybe Leo had called them. Jordan looked at the window, then back at me. Fear flickered in his eyes. This isn't over, Dad, he sneered. You want to play hardball? Fine. I will see you in court. And when I win, I'm going to tear this place down brick by brick. He grabbed his suitcase. Mackenzie grabbed hers, spilling more coffee on the floor. They stormed out the door, leaving the smell of expensive perfume and rot behind them. I watched them go. They were going to sue me. They were going to try to take my mind, my freedom, and my home. I walked downstairs to the bunker. I opened the safe again. I pulled out a file marked medical records. Etta had been thorough. She had me evaluated by 3 different specialists just a month before she died. Clean bill of health, sound mind, high cognitive function. She had anticipated the insanity plea. I poured myself another glass of wine. Jordan wanted a war. He wanted a legal battle. He didn't know that his mother had already fought it for me and won, but I wasn't just going to defend myself. I looked at the file on Omnicorp. I looked at the file on the Italian villa. Jordan was going to court to prove I was crazy. I was going to court to prove he was a criminal. The knock on the door this time was not angry like Jordan's had been, and it was not arrogant like the man from Omnicorp. It was precise. It was the knock of a man who was just doing a job. I opened the door to find a process server standing there holding a thick manila envelope. He did not smile. He asked if I was Quincy Turner, and when I nodded, he shoved the papers into my chest and walked away without a word. I took the envelope into the kitchen and laid it on the granite island. My hands were shaking before I even opened it. Inside was a petition filed in the state superior court. It was titled, In Re, the Conservatorship of Quincy Turner. I read the first page and felt the blood drain from my face. Jordan was not just suing for the house, he was suing for me. He was petitioning the court to declare me mentally incompetent. He claimed I was suffering from early onset dementia and paranoid delusions. He claimed I was a danger to myself and others. But the worst part was the evidence. Attached to the petition was a medical evaluation signed by a Dr. Van Houten. I had never met a Dr. Van Houten in my life. The report described appointments that never happened. It described symptoms I did not have. It said I forgot the names of family members. It said I had been found wandering the streets confused. It was all lies. Every single word was a fabrication designed to strip me of my rights. Jordan had hired a dirty lawyer who knew a dirty doctor, and together they were constructing a reality where I was no longer a person, but a problem to be managed. I sat on the stool feeling a cold sweat break out on my forehead. If the judge believed this, I would lose everything. I would lose the right to vote. I would lose the right to drive. I would lose control of my bank accounts. And worst of all, Jordan would be appointed my legal guardian. He would have total control over my life and my assets, including Lot 42. He would sell the land to Omnicorp for pennies just to pay off his Italian debt, and then he would stick me in a state facility to rot. Fear is a powerful thing. It can paralyze you. For a moment, I just wanted to curl up on the floor and give up. How could I fight this? I was just an old engineer. I did not know how to fight a legal system that could be bought and sold. But then I looked at the coffee machine Etta had bought. I looked at the marble floors she had chosen. She had known Jordan was capable of cruelty, but even she might not have predicted this level of betrayal. I grabbed my keys. I grabbed the papers. I needed to see Mr. Abernathy. Mr. Abernathy's office was in the city, tucked away in an old brick building that smelled of leather and dust. It was a sanctuary compared to the chaos of my life. I threw the papers onto his desk, my breath coming in short gasps. "They are lying," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "I have never met this doctor. I am not crazy, Mr. Abernathy. I can recite the load-bearing calculations for the Golden Gate Bridge right now if you want me to." Abernathy did not look at the papers. He did not look surprised. He simply poured 2 glasses of water and pushed one toward me. "Sit down, Quincy," he said, his voice calm and gravelly. "Drink the water." I sat down, clutching the glass. "You have to stop them. They are going to lock me away." "We will deal with the lawsuit," Abernathy said, waving his hand dismissively. "It is a standard intimidation tactic, dirty but predictable. We will demand an independent evaluation from a court-appointed physician. You will pass with flying colors, and Dr. Van Houten will lose his license. That is the easy part." "The easy part?" I asked, staring at him. "My son is trying to erase my existence, and you say that is the easy part?" Abernathy leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "Yes, Quincy. The lawsuit is just a distraction. It is smoke. We need to talk about the fire. We need to talk about why Jordan is so desperate and why Omnicorp is so aggressive. We need to talk about Lot 42. He opened a drawer and pulled out a large rolled-up map. He spread it out over the clutter on his desk. It was a blueprint of the Azure Coast Resort project. "You are an engineer," Quincy Abernathy said. "You understand structure. In architecture, do you know what a keystone is?" I nodded. It is the wedge-shaped stone at the very top of an arch. It locks all the other stones in place. If you remove the keystone, the entire arch collapses. "Exactly," Abernathy said. He took a red marker and circled my land on the map. Lot 42 is the keystone. I looked at the map closely. The resort was massive. It had 3 hotels, a marina, and a golf course. But directly behind it was a dense, protected marshland. And directly in front of it was the ocean. The only solid ground connecting the main highway to the resort entrance was a narrow strip of land running right through my property. "Without your land," Abernathy explained, "there is no road. If they cannot build a 4-lane access road, they cannot open the resort. Fire trucks cannot get in. Delivery trucks cannot get in. The city will not issue an occupancy permit without that road." I stared at the red circle. "So, they are stuck." "They are worse than stuck," Abernathy said, a rare smile touching his lips. "They are bleeding. Every day that project is delayed costs them interest on their loans. They have $500 million invested, and it is all sitting there useless because of one stubborn old man in a cabin. That is why they offered $50,000, I whispered. They thought I didn't know. Of course, Abernathy said. They offered $50,000. Then they probably sent thugs to scare you. Now Jordan is trying to declare you incompetent so he can sell it to them quickly. Jordan probably cut a side deal with them. Maybe they offered him $1 million to get the land. $1 million. I felt sick. Jordan would sell me out for $1 million to save his own skin in Italy. What is it really worth? I asked, looking up at Abernathy. If it is the keystone, what is the real price? Abernathy took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly. Etta bought that land 30 years ago for $12,000. She studied the city planning maps. She knew the marshland would never be rezoned. She knew eventually someone would try to build on the coast and they would have to come through Lot 42. He put his glasses back on and looked me dead in the eye. Based on the size of the resort and their projected revenue and the fact that they have no other option, the value of Lot 42 is not $50,000, it is not $1 million. He paused, letting the silence fill the room. We are looking at a starting bid of $15 million, Quincy, and if we squeeze them hard enough, we could get $20 million. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the desk to keep from falling out of my chair. $20 million. That was not just money. That was generational wealth. That was power. Etta, I whispered. You brilliant woman. She wanted you to have it, Abernathy said softly. But she knew you had to be ready. If you had sold it too early, you would have gotten pennies. You had to wait until they were desperate. And right now, Quincy, they are desperate. I sat back in the chair, my mind racing. I wasn't just a victim of a lawsuit anymore. I was the owner of the most valuable piece of dirt on the coast. I held the fate of a massive corporation in my hands. But Jordan stood in the way. If the court grants the temporary conservatorship, Abernathy warned, his voice turning serious again, Jordan will have the legal authority to sign the sale contract on your behalf. He will sell it to Omnicorp for a quick payout, probably just enough to cover his debts and buy a sports car. And the real value will be lost forever. So I have to stop him, I said. We have to stall him, Abernathy corrected. The court hearing is in 10 days. We need to delay the hearing or get the case thrown out before then. And in the meantime, we need to open negotiations with Omnicorp directly. We need to make them realize that dealing with Jordan is a risk and dealing with you is the only path forward. I stood up. The fear was gone, replaced by the cold, hard calculation of an engineer who sees the problem and knows the solution. They want to play dirty, I said, picking up the fake medical report. Then let us play dirty. Jordan wants to prove I am crazy. I am going to prove he is a fraud. I shook Abernathy's hand. Get the independent doctor. I will take any test you want. And draft a letter to Omnicorp. Tell them the price just went up. I walked out of the office into the bright sunlight. I had a war to fight on two fronts. I had to fight a billion-dollar corporation for the price of my land, and I had to fight my own son for the right to my own mind. I got into my truck and drove back toward Blackwater Bay. As I drove, I touched the dashboard. Etta was with me. I could feel her. She had given me the hammer and the nails. Now it was time to build my defense. But I knew Jordan wouldn't stop. He was cornered like a rat in a trap, and a cornered rat will do anything to survive. I needed to watch my back, because the next knock on my door might not be a process server. It might be something much worse. The lawsuit was a sledgehammer, but Mackenzie preferred the scalpel. 2 nights after I met with Mr. Abernathy and learned the true value of my land, the sensors on my driveway alerted me to a visitor. It was not the police, and it was not Jordan. It was a single sedan parking quietly at the edge of the gravel. I watched the monitor in the kitchen. Mackenzie stepped out of the car. She was not wearing the travel-stained clothes from her arrival a few days ago. She was wearing a red dress that was far too tight and far too short for a visit to her father-in-law. Her hair was perfectly styled, and she was holding a covered wicker basket. She checked her reflection in the car window, adjusted her lipstick, and walked toward the porch. She did not stomp. She swayed. It was a performance, and I was the only audience member. I opened the door before she could knock. I wanted to control the space. "Hello, Mackenzie," I said, keeping my body in the doorway, blocking her view of the interior. "Quincy," she cooed, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I was so worried about you. Jordan has been such a beast lately, I just had to come and check on you myself. I brought you lasagna. I know it is your favorite." It was not my favorite. Etta had been allergic to tomatoes for 40 years. We never ate lasagna, but I stepped aside and let her in. "Thank you," I said. She walked past me, leaving a trail of heavy floral perfume that made my nose itch. She went straight to the kitchen, placing the basket on the granite island. She turned to me, and the smile dropped from her face, replaced by a look of carefully rehearsed concern. "Quincy, we need to talk," she said, walking around the island to stand next to me. She was close, too close. She placed a hand on my forearm, and her fingers felt cold. "I am listening," I said, pouring myself a glass of water and not offering her one. "It is about the lawsuit," she whispered. She looked over her shoulder as if Jordan might be hiding in the pantry. "You have to understand that this is not my idea." "I tried to stop him, Quincy. I really did." "You tried to stop him," I repeated, keeping my face neutral. "Yes," she said, squeezing my arm. He is not himself. Italy changed him. The debt changed him. He is desperate and he is dangerous. He screams at me every night. He throws things. I am scared, Quincy. I am scared of my own husband." She squeezed out a tear. It rolled down her cheek with cinematic perfection. "He wants to put you in a home," she continued, her voice trembling. "He says once he gets the conservatorship, he is going to sell this place to Omnicorp for whatever quick cash they offer and then lock you away so he can go back to his party life. It breaks my heart. You do not deserve that. You are a good man, Quincy." I watched her performance. It was impressive. If I did not know she was the one who kicked me out into the rain, I might have believed her. "So why are you here, Mackenzie?" I asked. "If you are so scared, why come to the lion's den?" "Because I want to save you," she said, looking up at me with wide, pleading eyes. "And I want to save myself." She reached into her purse. I tensed, expecting a weapon or another legal notice. Instead, she pulled out a single document. It was a quitclaim deed transferring ownership of Lot 42, but the beneficiary line did not say Jordan Turner. It said Mackenzie Turner. "Sign it over to me," she said, rushing her words. "Not to Jordan. To me." I looked at the paper, then back at her. "To you." "Yes," she said, moving closer. "Listen to me, Quincy. If you sign this land to me, I will protect it. Jordan cannot sell what he does not own. I will keep him away from you. I will let you live here as long as you want. I will hire nurses for you. I will cook for you. I will be the daughter you never had." She ran her hand up my arm to my shoulder. It was meant to be comforting, but it felt like a spider crawling on my skin. "And in exchange," I asked. "In exchange," she whispered, leaning in so close I could smell the wine on her breath. "We cut Jordan out." I stood there, letting the silence hang in the air. This was it. The cracks in their alliance were not just hairline fractures, they were canyons. She was trying to steal the inheritance from her own husband, using his father as the weapon. "I need a moment," I said, stepping away from her touch. "I need to think." "Of course," she said, smiling, confident that she had hooked me. "Take your time. The lasagna is still warm." I walked over to the other side of the kitchen island. My phone was sitting on the counter charging. I picked it up casually, turning it over in my hands. I tapped the screen, waking it up. I swiped to the voice recorder app and hit the red button. I placed the phone back down, face down on the granite. "Mackenzie," I said, turning back to her. "I am an old man. I am confused. Help me understand this." She straightened up, sensing victory. "What do you need to know, Quincy?" "If I sign this paper," I said, speaking clearly for the microphone, "if I give you the land, what happens to Jordan? He is my son. He is your husband. Won't he be angry?" Mackenzie laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound that echoed off the marble floors. "Jordan is a loser, Quincy," she said, her voice losing all its sweetness. "He is a child in a man's suit. He lost the villa. He lost our savings. He is drowning in debt, and he is dragging me down with him. I am done with him." She walked around the counter again, her hips swaying. "You sign that paper and Jordan is history," she said. "I will file for divorce the next day. I will kick him to the curb just like he kicked you. He will be homeless, Quincy. He will be nothing. And you and I, we will be sitting on a gold mine." She picked up the deed and held it out to me. "He is useless," she spat. "He cannot even pay for a taxi. Do you really want a man like that controlling your life? Or do you want a woman who knows how to handle business?" I looked at her. I really looked at her. Beneath the designer dress and the makeup, she was just a scavenger. She was willing to destroy her marriage, betray her husband, and manipulate an old man just to get her hands on the money. She was worse than Jordan. Jordan was weak and greedy. Mackenzie was predatory. I reached out and took the paper from her hand. She smiled, her eyes lighting up with triumph. "You are making the right choice, Quincy," she said. "Etta would be proud of you." "Do not say her name," I said quietly. What she asked, blinking. I said, "Do not speak her name." I crumpled the paper in my fist. I squeezed it until my knuckles turned white. Mackenzie's smile faltered. "Quincy, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice rising in panic. "I am doing what I should have done the moment you walked in," I said. I picked up my phone and stopped the recording. I held it up. "Did you get all that?" I asked the empty room. Mackenzie stared at the phone. Her face went pale beneath the layers of foundation. "What is that?" "That is insurance," I said. "And it is a confession. You just admitted to conspiring to defraud your husband. You just admitted that your claims about his abuse were a tactic to get the land, and you just called him a useless loser who you planned to divorce." Mackenzie lunged for the phone. She was fast, but I was ready. I stepped back and she crashed into the counter. "Give me that," she screamed, her mask falling away completely. "Give it to me, you senile old bat." I stood tall. "I am 68 years old, Mackenzie. I built skyscrapers. Do you really think I am afraid of a little girl in a red dress?" I tapped the screen, sending the audio file to the cloud and to Mr. Abernathy's email. "It is sent," I said. "And if you do not get out of my house in 10 seconds, I am sending it to Jordan." Mackenzie froze. She looked at me with pure hatred. Her chest was heaving. "You wouldn't," she hissed. "He is your son. You wouldn't destroy his marriage. You destroyed his marriage the day you married him for his wallet," I said. "Now get out." She glared at me for one more second, then grabbed her purse. She snatched the basket of lasagna off the counter and threw it onto the floor. The dish shattered, sending red sauce and pasta exploding across my pristine marble floor. "I hope you die in this house," she screamed. "I hope you rot here alone." She stormed out, slamming the heavy oak door so hard the walls shook. I heard her car tires spin on the gravel as she sped away into the night. I looked at the mess on the floor. It would take me an hour to clean it up, but I didn't mind. I had the recording. I had the silver bullet. Jordan was trying to prove I was incompetent, but I had just proven that his star witness, his loving wife, was actually planning to stab him in the back. I walked over to the sink and dampened a cloth. I got down on my knees, my joints protesting, and started to wipe up the sauce. "Poor Jordan," I whispered to the empty room. "He thought he was the player. He didn't realize he was just the pawn. And now I had the power to flip the board. But I wasn't going to send it to him yet. No. That would be too easy. I needed to wait for the perfect moment. I needed them to be together. I needed them to be cornered. And then I would let them destroy each other." I finished cleaning the floor and poured myself a glass of wine. The house was quiet again, but outside the wind was picking up. The storm was far from over. In fact, the real storm was just getting started. The red sauce stain on the marble floor was finally gone, but the stain on my soul was fresh and spreading. I sat at the kitchen island, staring at the audio file on my phone screen. It was a small file, only 3 minutes long, but it contained enough venom to kill a marriage. Mackenzie's voice was crystal clear, admitting she planned to divorce Jordan, admitting she thought he was useless, and admitting she only wanted the land for herself. I could have waited. I could have walked into the courtroom next week and played this recording for the judge. It would have destroyed their case for conservatorship instantly. It would have proven that the people trying to control my life were actually conspiring to defraud each other. But waiting felt dangerous. Waiting gave them time to come up with new lies and new schemes. I needed to shatter their alliance now. I needed to turn the wolves against each other before they could circle back to me. I opened a burner app on my phone designed to send anonymous messages. I did not want Jordan to know it came from me. I wanted him to think Mackenzie had been careless or that someone else was watching them. Paranoia is a powerful weapon, and I intended to use it. I attached the audio file. I did not type a subject line. I did not type a message. The recording spoke for itself. I pressed send. The little swoosh sound of the message leaving my phone felt satisfying, but it also felt cold. I was an old man, a father, and a widower. I should have been spending my twilight years building birdhouses or fishing off the dock. Instead, I was launching a digital airstrike against my own son. I poured myself another glass of the 1982 Bordeaux. I walked over to the window and looked out at the dark bay. The wind was howling, rattling the storm shutters. I told myself I had no choice. I told myself they started it. But deep down I wondered if Etta was watching me, and if she would be proud or heartbroken to see her family reduced to this. I imagined the signal traveling through the air across the wet marshlands to the cheap motel on the highway where my son and his wife were hiding. I imagined the notification sound pinging in the silence of their room. I took a sip of wine. The fuse was lit. Now I just had to wait for the explosion. 10 miles away in room 104 of the Starlight Motel, the atmosphere was already toxic. I learned the details later from the police report and the witness statements from the neighbors who heard the screaming through the thin walls. Jordan was sitting on the edge of the sagging mattress nursing a bottle of cheap vodka. He was staring at the wall, his mind racing with fear about the Italian debt and the upcoming court hearing. Mackenzie was in the bathroom applying fresh makeup, trying to pretend that they were not living in squalor. When Jordan's phone pinged, he ignored it at first. He thought it was another debt collector or another threat from the Italian consulate. But it pinged again, a persistent notification. He picked it up. He saw the file. He pressed play. Mackenzie's voice filled the small room. "He is a loser, Quincy. He is a child in a man's suit." Jordan went rigid. He held the phone closer to his ear, his knuckles turning white. "I will file for divorce the next day. I will kick him to the curb, just like he kicked you." The bathroom door opened. Mackenzie stepped out wrapped in a thin towel. She saw Jordan's face. She saw the way his eyes were bulging and his veins were throbbing in his neck. She opened her mouth to ask what was wrong, but she never got the chance. Jordan launched the phone across the room. It smashed into the wall right next to her head, cracking the screen, but the audio kept playing. "He is useless. He cannot even pay for a taxi. You traitor," Jordan screamed. He lunged at her. He did not hit her, but he grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her violently. "You went to him. You went behind my back." Mackenzie shoved him away. Her fingernails raked across his chest, leaving red welts. "Get off me, you drunk." "I heard you," Jordan roared, kicking the cheap motel chair over. "I heard you tell him you were going to divorce me. You are trying to steal the land for yourself. You are trying to cut me out." "So what if I am?" Mackenzie screamed back, her face twisting into a mask of pure hatred. "Look at you, Jordan. Look at where we are. We are in a roach motel because you are too stupid to read a contract. You lost the villa. You lost our savings. You are nothing but an anchor around my neck." They fought like wild animals. It was the unleashing of years of resentment. Jordan accused her of being a gold digger. She accused him of being a failure who lived in his mother's shadow. They threw lamps. They smashed the television. The room was being destroyed piece by piece, mirroring the destruction of their marriage. But then, in the middle of the chaos, Jordan's phone rang. It was not a text. It was a call. The screen was cracked, but the caller ID was visible through the spiderweb of glass. Italian Ministry of Justice. The room went silent. The heavy breathing of the two combatants was the only sound. The ringing continued, loud and demanding. It was a reminder of the reality that was hunting them down. Jordan picked up the phone. He put it on speaker. A voice speaking heavily accented English delivered the news that would seal their fate. "Mr. Turner, this is a final notification. An international warrant for your detention is being processed. Unless the sum of €2 million is secured within 48 hours, we will petition for your extradition." The call ended. Jordan looked at Mackenzie. Mackenzie looked at Jordan. The hatred was still there in their eyes, but something else had crept in. Terror. Pure, unadulterated terror. They realized in that moment that they were trapped. If they divorced now, they would both go down. Mackenzie would be dragged into the debt investigation as his spouse. Jordan would go to an Italian prison. They had no money for lawyers. They had no allies. "We are out of time," Jordan whispered, his voice trembling. "The court hearing for Dad is next week." "That is too late. Even if I win the conservatorship, it will take months to sell the land. We do not have months. We have hours." Mackenzie wiped the smeared mascara from her cheeks. Her eyes went cold. The shark had returned. "We need that inheritance now," she said. "Not next week." "Now. But he won't sell," Jordan said, kicking the broken lamp. "He has the money. He has the recording. He is going to crush us in court." "Not if he isn't there," Mackenzie said softly. Jordan looked at her. "What do you mean?" "The inheritance laws," she said, walking over to him. "If Quincy dies intestate without a will, you are the sole heir. It happens automatically. Immediate transfer of assets. We could sell the land to Omnicorp the next morning. They have the check ready." Jordan stared at his wife. She was suggesting murder. He should have been horrified. He should have been disgusted. But he looked at the cracked phone. He thought about the Italian prison. He thought about the millions of dollars buried under my cabin. How he asked, His voice was barely a whisper. "A fire," she said. "An accident. Old houses have bad wiring. Old men knock over candles during storms. It happens all the time." Jordan looked at the rain pounding against the motel window. It was a perfect night for a tragedy. The roads were empty, the bay was isolated, and the cabin was made of wood. He picked up his car keys. "We need gasoline," he said. They left the motel room without looking back at the destruction they had caused. They got into their rental car, united by a darkness that was far deeper than greed. I had sent the recording hoping to break them apart. I had hoped they would destroy each other in a legal battle. I had made a fatal miscalculation. I had underestimated how desperate they were. Instead of driving them apart, I had welded them together with fear. I had backed two dangerous animals into a corner and showed them that I was the only thing standing between them and survival. I sat in my warm cabin listening to the jazz music, unaware that 5 miles away my son was filling a red plastic canister with high-octane fuel. I thought I had won the chess match. I didn't realize they had flipped the board and pulled out a match. The storm outside was intensifying. The wind howled like a warning I couldn't understand. I finished my wine and decided to go to bed early. It had been a long day of victories. I didn't know it was about to become the longest night of my life. I locked the front door. But locks don't stop fire, and steel doors don't stop family members who have lost their souls. The game was tied 2-2, and the referee had just made a terrible call against our team. Leo was sitting on the leather sofa waving a bag of popcorn and shouting at the 80-inch television screen that rose silently from the floor. I was sitting in my armchair nursing a glass of sparkling water and laughing. It was the first time in weeks that I had laughed. It was the first time since Etta died that the cabin felt like a home instead of a fortress. Outside, the storm had finally broken, leaving behind a heavy silence and a thick fog that rolled off the bay. The wind had died down, which made the sudden noise outside even more noticeable. It was a soft thud, followed by a splashing sound like someone pouring a bucket of water onto the porch. Leo stopped shouting at the TV. He froze his hand halfway to his mouth. "Did you hear that, Mr. Quincy?" I muted the television. "Hear what, Leo?" It sounded like liquid, Leo said, standing up slowly. "And do you smell that?" I took a deep breath. At first I only smelled the popcorn and the faint scent of the cedar walls. But then it hit me. It was a sharp chemical sting that cut through the luxury of the cabin. It was the smell of a gas station on a hot day. It was the smell of high-octane fuel. "Gasoline," I whispered, standing up, my knees popping in the sudden tension. Leo moved to the window, peering through the slats of the heavy storm shutters. "There is someone out there," he whispered. "I see a shadow. 2 shadows. They are near the foundation." My heart slammed against my ribs. I knew who they were. I knew exactly who they were. I had sent the recording hoping to scare them off, but instead, I had driven them to madness. They were not here to talk. They were here to erase the evidence. "Hey!" Leo shouted, banging on the glass. "Get away from there!" The answer was a sudden whoosh of air followed by a blinding flash of light. It was not a flicker. It was an explosion. The world outside the window turned a violent orange. The heat radiated through the glass instantly. "They lit it!" Leo yelled, jumping back. "They lit the whole porch." I ran to the front door. I grabbed the handle and twisted. It wouldn't budge. It wasn't locked from the inside. Someone had wedged something against it from the outside. A heavy timber or maybe a car jack. "They blocked us in," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "They are trying to cook us alive." Smoke began to curl under the doorframe, black and thick. The fire alarm screamed a piercing sound that vibrated in my teeth. The heat was rising fast. I could hear the wood of the porch crackling and popping as the flames ate through the dry timber. This cabin was built strong, but it was still made of wood. And fire is the one enemy that wood cannot defeat. "We need to get out." Leo coughed, pulling his shirt up over his nose. "The back door." I shook my head. "The back door opens onto the deck, which wraps around to the front. The whole perimeter is soaked in gas. If we open that door, we just let the fire in." "We are trapped," Leo said, his eyes wide with terror. He looked around the room, looking for something to break the glass. But the storm shutters were steel. We were sealed inside a burning box. The temperature in the room spiked. The beautiful marble floors were getting warm. The smoke was getting thicker, filling the top half of the room with a deadly gray cloud. I coughed, feeling the soot coat my throat. This was it. This was how Jordan wanted it to end. An tragic accident. A faulty wire. An old man and his guest dead in a fire. No, I said. Not today. I walked to the kitchen island. Etta. My brilliant, paranoid Etta. She had thought of everything. She knew we were far from the fire department. She knew that by the time a truck got down that muddy road, the house would be ash. So she had installed her own solution. I reached under the granite overhang near the sink. There was a small panel there secured with a simple latch. I flipped it open, revealing a large red button encased in plastic. "What is that?" Leo asked, coughing violently as the smoke dropped lower. "This is the end of the party," I said. "Get down, Leo. Get on the floor and cover your head. Do not breathe." I lifted the plastic cover. I looked at the orange glow of the fire dancing through the cracks in the door. I thought of Jordan standing out there watching his inheritance burn. I slammed my fist down on the button. There was no siren. There was no water. Instead, there was a deafening hiss like 1,000 snakes striking at once. High-velocity jets hidden in the ceiling popped open. They did not spray water, which would have ruined the art and the electronics. They sprayed halon gas, a heavy, colorless chemical agent designed to suck the oxygen out of the air and starve the fire instantly. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The roar of the fire outside was silenced as the gas seeped out through the vents. The crackling stopped. The orange glow vanished, replaced by a thick, unnatural darkness. But the gas came with a price. It displaced the oxygen in the room. My lungs burned. I gasped for air, but there was nothing to breathe. The world started to spin. I saw Leo curled up on the rug, gasping. I tried to walk toward him, but my legs turned to rubber. I grabbed the edge of the counter, but my fingers were numb. I sank to the floor. The marble was cool against my cheek. My vision tunneled. I saw Etta's face smiling at me. I saw the bridge I built in 1985. I saw Jordan as a baby. The darkness took me. I woke up to the feeling of cold rain on my face. My chest hurt. My throat felt like I had swallowed broken glass. I tried to sit up, but a strong hand pushed me back down. "Easy, Mr. Quincy, easy. Breathe slow." It was Leo. He was covered in soot, his dreadlocks wet with rain, but he was alive. He was holding an oxygen mask to my face. I looked around. I was lying on the wet grass about 50 yards from the cabin. The house stood dark and silent against the night sky. It was scorched. The porch was black, but it was standing. The fire was out. "We made it," Leo whispered, his voice raspy. "I dragged you out through the bunker exit once the fire died down. The halon system worked. It killed the fire in 10 seconds. I took a deep, ragged breath of the pure oxygen. I was alive. Then I saw the lights, red and blue strobe lights cutting through the fog, a fire truck, an ambulance, and a police cruiser. And then I saw the actors take the stage. From the edge of the woods, 2 figures came running. They were screaming. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. "Dad. Oh my God, Dad." It was Jordan. He threw himself onto the wet grass beside me. He was crying. He was shaking. He grabbed my hand and pressed it to his face. I saw the smoke. He sobbed loud enough for the paramedics to hear. "We were driving by checking on you and we saw the smoke. Oh God, I thought you were dead. I thought I lost you." Mackenzie was right behind him. She was wailing, holding her hands to her mouth. Her makeup was smeared, but not from fighting. It was smeared for effect. "Is he okay?" she screamed at the paramedic. "Please tell me he is okay. He is all we have." "Oh, Quincy, we were so worried." I watched them through half-closed eyes. I watched my son pretending to grieve for the father he had just tried to incinerate. I watched my daughter-in-law pretend to care for the man she had just cursed. They looked at the cabin. They saw that it was still standing. I saw a flicker of confusion in Jordan's eyes. He expected a pile of ash. He expected a body bag. He did not expect me to be staring back at him. I closed my eyes. I let my body go limp. I decided to give them exactly what they wanted. "Sir, can you hear me?" the paramedic asked, shining a light in my eyes. I did not answer. I let my breathing become shallow. "He is in shock," the paramedic yelled. "We need to load him up. Get the stretcher." Jordan stood up, wiping his fake tears. He looked at the paramedic, his voice thick with concern. "Do whatever it takes," he said. "Take him to the best hospital. I will pay for everything. Just save my father." Then he leaned in close to my ear. He thought I was unconscious. He thought no one could hear him over the noise of the siren and the rain. "Why didn't you just die, you stubborn old mule?" he whispered. A chill went down my spine, colder than the rain. He wasn't relieved I was alive. He was disappointed. They loaded me into the ambulance. Leo tried to climb in, but the police held him back. "I am family," Jordan shouted, pushing Leo away. "I am his son. I will ride with him. You stay here, you freak." The doors slammed shut. I was trapped in a metal box with the man who had tried to kill me. Jordan sat on the bench holding my hand, stroking my knuckles with his thumb. "Don't worry, Dad," he said softly, staring at my closed eyelids. "I will take care of everything now. I will handle the doctors. I will handle the house. You just rest. You rest forever." I lay there listening to the siren wail, listening to the monster beside me plan my demise. He thought the game was over. He thought he had won. But he forgot one thing. The fire didn't kill me. It forged me, and when I wake up from this hospital bed, I am not going to be Quincy the victim anymore. I am going to be Quincy the executioner. And I have the ultimate witness waiting back at the cabin. Leo saw everything, and Leo had a tire iron. But for now, I played dead, because the dead hear secrets that the living never do. The antiseptic smell of the hospital room was sharp enough to burn the inside of my nose, but it was nothing compared to the burning in my lungs. My chest felt like it was filled with broken glass and concrete dust. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only thing telling me I was still alive. Beep, 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 a steady electronic drumbeat counting the seconds of a life my own son had tried to extinguish. I kept my eyes closed. My body was heavy, weighed down by exhaustion and the lingering effects of the halon gas and smoke inhalation. I could hear the hush of the ventilation system and the squeak of rubber shoes on linoleum floors in the hallway. I was in the intensive care unit. I knew this because the air felt different here. It felt expensive and desperate. I had been awake for an hour, but I had not moved a muscle. I had learned a long time ago that you learn more about people when they think you are asleep than you ever do when you are looking them in the eye. When you are awake, people wear masks. When you are asleep or in a coma, the masks come off. The heavy door to my room hissed open. A rush of hallway noise entered, followed by the click of high heels and the heavy thud of dress shoes. I did not need to open my eyes to know who it was. The scent of stale cigarette smoke and expensive perfume drifted over the bed, overpowering the smell of the hospital. It was them, the grieving family. "Oh, doctor, is there any change?" Mackenzie's voice was high and trembling. It was a perfect performance of a distraught daughter-in-law. "Please tell us, there is some hope." I heard a deep voice, probably the attending physician, answer her. "He is stable but non-responsive, Mrs. Turner. The smoke inhalation was severe and the oxygen deprivation has put him in a comatose state. We are monitoring his brain activity, but for now, we just have to wait." "Wait," Jordan's voice cut in. It sounded ragged. "How long do we have to wait? Hours? Days?" "It is impossible to say," the doctor replied. "It could be days, it could be weeks, or he might never wake up. I will leave you alone with him for a moment. Talk to him. Sometimes patients can hear their loved ones." The door hissed shut again. The doctor was gone. The room went silent. The performance dropped instantly. The air in the room shifted from fake sorrow to cold, hard malice. I felt someone lean over the bed. I felt hot breath on my face. "Weeks," Jordan whispered. His voice was not sad. It was terrified. "We do not have weeks, Mackenzie. We do not even have days." Mackenzie let out a long, frustrated sigh. I heard the sound of a chair being dragged across the floor. She sat down heavily. "He is like a cockroach," she hissed. "Why won't he just die? We blocked the door, Jordan. We soaked the porch. How did he survive that?" Jordan paced the room. I could hear his footsteps going back and forth, back and forth. "It must have been the fire suppression system," he muttered. "That old witch Etta must have installed something industrial. Who puts halon gas in a log cabin?" I lay there listening to my son curse his dead mother for saving my life. A single tear leaked from the corner of my eye and slid down into my ear. I hoped they didn't see it. "So what do we do now?" Mackenzie asked. "The Italian consulate called me again while we were in the waiting room. They are giving us 24 hours before they issue the arrest warrant. If we do not wire 2 million euros by tomorrow noon, we are going to prison, Jordan. Real prison." Jordan stopped pacing. He was standing right next to my head. I could hear him breathing. It was a shallow, panicked sound. "We cannot wait for him to die," he said, "and we cannot wait for him to wake up. Even if he wakes up, he knows. He knows we started the fire. He will tell the police." "So we have to make sure he does not talk," Mackenzie said. Her voice was flat. No emotion, just a problem to be solved. Jordan went silent. I felt his hand touch the railing of the bed. "Are you saying we should pull the plug?" he asked. "Do not be stupid," Mackenzie snapped. "If we pull the plug, the alarms will go off. The nurses will come running. It will look like murder. We need something cleaner." I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the smoke. They were discussing my murder with the same casual tone they would use to discuss ordering a pizza. Then what Jordan asked. "The deed," Mackenzie said. I heard the rustle of paper. She must have pulled it from her purse. "I have the transfer deed right here," she said. "It transfers lot 42 from Quincy Turner to Jordan Turner. All it needs is a signature, or in the case of an incapacitated person, a thumbprint witnessed by a notary." "We do not have a notary," Jordan said. "I have a friend," Mackenzie said. "A guy I used to party with. He lost his license a few years ago, but he still has the stamp. For $5,000 he will backdate anything." Jordan let out a low whistle. "Okay, so we get the print. Then we sell the land to Omnicorp tomorrow morning. We pay the Italians. We are free." And Quincy Mackenzie asked, "What about him?" Jordan hesitated. For a second I hoped. I prayed that somewhere deep inside that suit there was still a tiny piece of the boy I raised. The boy who cried when his goldfish died. The boy who made me a Father's Day card out of macaroni. "Once the land is sold," Jordan said, his voice hardening into ice, "it does not matter if he wakes up. Who will believe him? He is a senile old man who started a fire by accident. We will have the money. We can hire the best lawyers. We can put him in a state facility and sedate him until he forgets his own name." My heart shattered. It didn't break. It disintegrated. The last thread of hope I had held on to, the belief that blood was thicker than water, was severed. Jordan was not my son anymore. He was a predator, and I was just prey. "Let us do it," Mackenzie said. "Get his hand." I felt Jordan's cold, clammy fingers wrap around my wrist. He lifted my right hand. It felt limp and heavy. I forced myself to remain completely relaxed. If I fought them now, if I opened my eyes, they would know I heard everything. And if they knew I heard everything, they might get desperate enough to use a pillow instead of a thumbprint. He pressed my thumb onto an ink pad. The ink was cold and wet. "Okay, hold it steady," Mackenzie said. He pressed my thumb onto the paper. He rolled it side to side, just like I had taught him to do when we made fingerprint art when he was 5. "Got it," she whispered. Jordan dropped my hand. It fell back onto the sheets. He wiped the ink off my thumb with a tissue, scrubbing hard to remove the evidence. There he said, "It is done. Lot 42 is ours." I lay there listening to the sound of paper being folded. They had stolen my land. They had stolen my legacy. And they had done it while standing over what they thought was my deathbed. "We should go," Jordan said. "We need to meet the notary and then get to the Omnicorp office first thing in the morning." "What about the doctors?" Mackenzie asked. "Tell them we are going home to pray," Jordan said. "Tell them to call us if anything happens." They walked to the door. "Goodbye, Dad," Jordan whispered. It was not a goodbye. It was a dismissal. The door hissed shut. I waited. I counted to 60 in my head. Beep, beep, beep. Then I opened my eyes. The room was blurry at first, but then it sharpened. The white ceiling tiles, the IV bags hanging like strange fruit, the ink stain on my thumb that Jordan hadn't quite scrubbed off. I wasn't sad anymore. The sadness had burned away in the fire. The fear had evaporated in the halon gas. All that was left was a cold clarity, a diamond-hard resolve. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was a vegetable. They thought they had won. I reached for the call button on the side of the bed. My arm was weak and shaking, but my finger was steady. I pressed the red button. A moment later, a nurse bustled in. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and strong hands. She looked at the monitors and then at me. "Mr. Turner," she gasped. "You are awake." "Oh, thank goodness. Let me get the doctor." I reached out and grabbed her wrist. My grip was surprisingly strong. "No," I rasped. My voice sounded like gravel grinding together. She looked down at me, surprised. "Mr. Turner, you need a doctor." "No doctor yet," I whispered. "And do not call my family." She frowned, confused. "But sir, your son was just here. He was so worried." I looked her dead in the eye. "He is not worried," I said. "He is disappointed." The nurse froze. She looked at my face and saw something there that made her stop. She saw the truth. "Listen to me," I said, pulling her closer. "I need you to do exactly what I say. My life depends on it. Is there a police officer in the hospital?" "Yes," she said slowly. "There is usually one in the ER." "Get him," I said. "And get my lawyer. His name is Abernathy. His number is in my phone, which should be in my personal effects bag." "But sir," she stammered. "Please," I said. "My son tried to kill me last night. And he just forged my signature to sell my home. If you call him now, he will finish the job." The nurse's eyes went wide. She looked at the door, then back at me. She was a professional. She had seen domestic disputes before. She had seen the darkness people hide. She nodded. "I will get the officer," she whispered, "and I will lock this door from the outside. No one gets in without my key." "Thank you," I said, releasing her arm. She hurried out, and I heard the click of the lock. I lay back on the pillows. I looked at my thumb. The ink was still there, a black mark of betrayal. Jordan was on his way to sell my land. He was going to walk into Omnicorp like a king. He was going to hand over the deed with my stolen fingerprint. But he didn't know about the cameras. He didn't know about Leo. And he didn't know that the vegetable in room 304 was currently organizing a welcoming party for him. I closed my eyes again, but this time I wasn't sleeping. I was visualizing. I was picturing the look on Jordan's face when he realized that the dead man was walking. I took a deep breath. My lungs still hurt, but the air tasted sweet. It tasted like justice. Tomorrow morning, Jordan and Mackenzie were going to have a very bad day, and I was going to be there to watch every second of it. 3 days is a long time to play dead, especially when your heart is beating with the rhythm of pure rage. I lay in that hospital bed for 72 hours listening to the hum of the machines and the whispered conversations of the nurses who were guarding my door. My nurse, the one I had trusted with my life, had done her job perfectly. She had told the world I was in a deep coma. She had told Jordan that my prognosis was grim, and she had kept the door locked. During those 3 days, I did not sleep. I plotted. I replayed the fire in my mind. I smelled the gasoline again. I felt the heat on my face. And I thought about Etta. I thought about how she must have felt watching Jordan grow into a man who valued money over blood. She had prepared me for this. She had given me the bunker, the halon system, and the cameras. Now it was time to use them. On the morning of the 3rd day, I sat up. My muscles were stiff and my lungs still ached with a dull, heavy throb, but my mind was razor sharp. I pressed the call button. When my nurse arrived, I gave her the list. It was a short list, but it carried the weight of a death sentence for my son's ambitions. "Call them," I said, my voice raspy but strong. "Call Jordan and Mackenzie. Tell them I have woken up. Tell them I am confused and I want to sign the papers." The nurse looked at me with worry in her eyes. "Are you sure, Mr. Turner? The police officer is just down the hall. We can arrest them the moment they walk in." "No," I said. "Arresting them is too easy. I want to destroy them first. And call Mr. Abernathy. Tell him to bring the laptop. And one more thing. Call the number on this card." I handed her the business card Mr. Sterling from Omnicorp had left on my porch days ago. "Mr. Sterling," she asked. "The developer." "Yes," I said. "Tell him I am ready to negotiate. Tell him to come to this room immediately if he wants lot 42. An hour later, the stage was set. I was propped up on pillows, looking frail and weak. It was an act. Under the thin hospital sheet, my fists were clenched. Mr. Abernathy was standing in the corner holding his briefcase like a shield. He gave me a nod. He knew the plan. He had reviewed the footage from the cloud server I had sent him. The door opened. Mr. Sterling walked in first. He looked annoyed. He was wearing another expensive suit and he kept checking his watch. "This is highly irregular," he muttered, looking at the medical equipment. "I usually conduct business in boardrooms, not intensive care units." "You want the land?" I wheezed. "You are here? Sit down." Sterling sat in the corner looking uncomfortable. Then the stars of the show arrived. Jordan burst through the door with Mackenzie right behind him. They looked exhausted, but there was a manic energy vibrating off them. They had spent the last 3 days terrified that the Italians would come for them or that I would die before the sale went through. Now they thought their prayers had been answered. Dad Jordan cried, rushing to the bed. He grabbed my hand, the same hand he had forced onto the ink pad while I was unconscious. Oh, thank God. The nurse called. She said you were awake. She said you were asking for us. I looked at him. I looked at the dark circles under his eyes. I looked at the sweat on his forehead. I am awake, son, I whispered. It is a miracle, isn't it? It is, Mackenzie said, squeezing in beside him. She was wearing a black dress as if she was already prepared for a funeral, but had accessorized it with a bright scarf for the occasion. We have been praying nonstop, Quincy. We were so scared. I bet you were, I said. Jordan looked at Mr. Sterling and then at Mr. Abernathy. He straightened up, trying to look authoritative. Who are these people, Dad? You need rest. You do not need a crowded room. Mr. Sterling stood up. I am here to buy the land, he said. Your father called me. Jordan's eyes lit up. He looked at Mackenzie and a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. He thought I had finally broken. He thought the fire had scared me into submission. Oh, Jordan said, his voice smoothing out into a fake professional tone. Well, that is excellent news, Dad. I am so glad you finally saw reason. This is the right choice. With your health the way it is, you cannot live in that cabin. You need professional care. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. Actually, Mr. Sterling, Jordan said, turning to the developer, you do not need to negotiate with my father. As of 3 days ago, I hold the power of attorney and the transfer deed for the property. He held up the paper with my forced thumbprint on it. Dad signed it over to me right before his accident. Jordan lied smoothly. He wanted to make sure everything was handled. We can finalize the sale right now? Sterling looked interested. He reached for the paper. Is this true, Mr. Turner? I watched the paper moving from my son's hand to the developer's hand. It was the moment of their victory. They had done it. They had forged the signature, survived the fire, and found a buyer. They were seconds away from $5 million. Jordan looked at me. His eyes were pleading. He was silently begging me not to speak. He was begging me to just die a little bit inside so he could live. Dad, tell him, Jordan said. Tell him it is what you want. I took a deep breath. The oxygen flowing through the nasal cannula felt cold and clean. I did not sign that paper. I said clearly. The room went silent. Jordan froze. Dad, do not be confused. Jordan said, a nervous laugh bubbling up. You remember, you were tired. We did it right here. I was in a coma. Jordan, I said, my voice dropping an octave, losing the feigned weakness. I was unconscious. You came into this room. You thought I was dying, and you pressed my thumb onto that paper to steal my home. Mackenzie stepped forward, her face twisting into a snarl. That is a lie. He is hallucinating, doctor. The smoke damage affected his brain. He does not know what he is saying. Mr. Sterling stopped reaching for the paper. He pulled his hand back as if the document was radioactive. He looked from Jordan to me, sensing the toxicity in the air. I am not hallucinating, Mackenzie, I said, and I am not confused. In fact, I have never seen things more clearly. I looked at Mr. Abernathy. Now. Abernathy stepped forward. He placed his laptop on the rolling table at the foot of my bed. He connected it to the large television mounted on the wall. What is this? Jordan demanded. What are you doing? We are watching a movie, I said. A home movie. The screen flickered to life. The image was grainy and black and white at first, but then it switched to sharp, high-definition infrared. It showed the front porch of the cabin. The timestamp in the corner read 3 nights ago, 11:45 p.m. Jordan went pale. He stopped breathing. Mackenzie put her hand over her mouth. On the screen, 2 figures emerged from the darkness. They were glowing white against the cool background of the night. Their faces were clearly visible. That is you, Jordan, I said, pointing at the screen, and that is you, Mackenzie. We watched in silence as the figure of Jordan poured liquid from a red canister all over the wooden planks of the porch. We watched as he splashed it on the door. We watched as Mackenzie laughed a silent, ghostly laugh and handed him a box of matches. No, Jordan whispered. No. That is not possible. There are no cameras. We checked. Etta hid them well, I said. On the screen, the Jordan in the video struck a match. He threw it. The porch exploded into white light. The camera shook but kept recording. We watched as the 2 figures ran away, disappearing into the woods, leaving their father to burn. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the hospital room was heavier than the smoke had been. It was the silence of a grave. Mr. Sterling stood up slowly. He looked at Jordan with a mixture of disgust and horror. He brushed his suit jacket as if being in the same room with them had dirtied him. "I think I'm done here," he said. "Omnicorp does not do business with arsonists." "Wait!" Jordan screamed, grabbing Sterling's arm. "It is fake. It is a deep fake. My father is a computer genius. He made it up. Get your hands off me!" Sterling snapped, shoving him away. Mackenzie was backing toward the door. Her eyes were darting around, looking for an exit. She realized the game was over. She realized the Italian prison was now the least of her worries. "Where are you going, Mackenzie?" I asked. "You haven't heard the best part." She stopped her hand on the doorknob. "The best part," I said, sitting up straight, pulling the tubes out of my nose, "is that I am not just a witness. I am the victim, and in this state, attempted murder of a family member carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 20 years. Jordan fell to his knees. It wasn't a theatrical fall this time. His legs simply gave out. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw the real Jordan. Not the arrogant businessman, not the greedy son, just a scared little boy who had made a mistake he couldn't fix. "Dad," he sobbed. "I am sorry. I was desperate. The Italians, they were going to kill me. I didn't want to hurt you. We thought you would run out the back. We thought you would just be scared. You blocked the door." "Jordan," I said, cold as ice. "You wedged a tire iron against the handle. I saw it when the fireman let me out. You didn't want me to run. You wanted me to roast." "I didn't," Jordan wailed. "Mackenzie told me to. She said it was the only way." Mackenzie screamed, "You liar. It was your idea. You were the one who bought the gas." They started screaming at each other right there in the hospital room, accusing, blaming, tearing each other apart just like they had in the hotel room. But this time, there was no reconciliation. This time, there was only the end. Mr. Abernathy opened the door. He didn't have to call anyone. 2 police officers were already standing there. They had been watching the live stream from the hallway. "Jordan Turner, Mackenzie." Turner, one of the officers said, stepping into the room with handcuffs drawn. "You are under arrest for attempted murder, arson, and fraud." They dragged them out. Jordan was crying, calling my name, begging for mercy. Mackenzie was cursing, spitting venom at everyone. I watched them go. I didn't look away. I watched until the door closed and their voices faded down the hallway. The room was quiet again. Mr. Sterling looked at me. He looked at the empty doorway. He looked at the floor. "I suppose the price of the land just went up," he said quietly. I looked at him. I felt tired. I felt old, but I felt free. "You have no idea, Mr. Sterling," I said. "You have no idea." I lay back on the pillows. The monitors were still beeping. Beep, 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 but now they sounded like a countdown to a new life. A life without rats. A life without vipers. Just me, Etta's ghost, and $20 million. The room was suddenly filled with the heavy metallic sound of justice clicking into place. The 2 police officers who had been waiting in the hallway stepped into the room, their presence filling the small space with an air of absolute authority. They did not shout. They did not run. They simply walked over to Jordan and Mackenzie, who were now huddled together near the door like frightened animals trapped in a cage. Jordan looked at the handcuffs dangling from the officer's belt, and his legs finally gave out completely. He collapsed onto the linoleum floor of the hospital room, not in a theatrical way like he had done before, but with the heavy dead weight of a man whose soul has just left his body. He grabbed the bed rail with shaking hands, his knuckles white as bone. "Dad, please," he whimpered. His voice was so small, so broken, that for a fleeting second I remembered the 5-year-old boy who used to scrape his knees and run to me for comfort. "Dad, tell them. Tell them it is a misunderstanding. We can fix this. I am your son. You cannot let them take me to prison." I looked down at him. I looked at the tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat of his desperation. I looked for that little boy I used to know, but I could not find him. All I saw was a stranger in a ruined suit, a man who had tried to burn me alive for a paycheck. "Officer, please," Mackenzie shrieked as the female officer grabbed her arm. "Get your hands off me. This is a mistake. I am a victim here. My husband forced me to do it. He is the arsonist. He is the one with the debt. I just wanted to help him." The officer spun Mackenzie around and pressed her against the wall. "You have the right to remain silent, ma'am. the officer said, her voice calm and practiced. "And I suggest you use it." The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut around Mackenzie's wrists cut through her screaming. She went silent, her eyes wide with shock. She looked at Jordan, who was now being pulled to his feet by the other officer. Jordan looked at me one last time. His eyes were red-rimmed and pleading. "Dad, please. The Italians. They will extradite me. I will die in there. Do not do this to me." "I did not do this to you, Jordan," I said, my voice steady despite the pain in my chest. "You did this to yourself the moment you lit that match. You chose money over your father. You chose greed over blood." Mr. Sterling, the developer from Omnicorp, had been watching the entire scene from the corner of the room. He looked pale. He had come here expecting a quick business deal, and instead he had walked into a crime scene. He picked up his briefcase and started to edge toward the door, trying to slip past the police and the drama. "Mr. Sterling," I said, calling out to him. He froze. He looked back at me, his hand on the door handle. "Mr. Turner." "I really think I should go," he stammered. "This is obviously a family matter, and Omnicorp does not want to be involved in a criminal investigation." "You came here to buy land, didn't you?" I asked, sitting up straighter in the bed. Sterling hesitated. He looked at Jordan in handcuffs, then back at me. "Well, yes, but under the circumstances—" "The land is still there," I said. "The cabin is scorched, but the ground is solid. And unlike my son, I am the legal owner. And unlike my son, I am ready to sign." Jordan's head snapped up. He stared at me with disbelief. "You are going to sell it," he gasped. "After all of this, after sending me to prison, you are just going to sell it to him anyway." I ignored Jordan. I motioned for Mr. Abernathy to bring the laptop and the papers closer. "Sit down, Mr. Sterling," I said, pointing to the chair Jordan had vacated. "Let us do business." Sterling walked slowly back to the bedside. He sat down, opening his briefcase with trembling hands. He pulled out a contract. It was the standard purchase agreement, the one he had tried to force on me for $50,000 weeks ago. "We are prepared to offer the full market value," Sterling said, trying to regain his composure. "Given the importance of the location to our resort, we are authorized to offer $15 million for the full purchase of Lot 42. $15 million. Jordan let out a choked sob. He sagged in the policeman's grip. $15 million. He had tried to kill me for a fraction of that. If he had just been patient, if he had just been kind, he would have shared in all of this. I looked at the contract. I looked at the number 15 followed by 6 zeros. It was enough money to live like a king for 10 lifetimes. But then I thought about Etta. I thought about how she had held on to that land for 30 years. She didn't buy it just to flip it. She bought it because she loved the bay. She loved the water. "I am not selling," I said. The room went quiet again. Sterling looked confused. "But Mr. Turner, you just said—" "I said I am ready to sign," I interrupted. "But I'm not selling the land. My wife Etta Turner bought that land. It stays in the Turner name." I reached out and took the contract from Sterling's hand. I tore it in half. The sound of the ripping paper was loud and satisfying. Mr. Abernathy handed me a new document, one we had drafted together 3 days ago while I was hiding in this hospital bed. "This is a lease agreement," I said, sliding it across the table to Sterling. "A 99-year ground lease. Omnicorp gets the right to build your road. You get your access to the beach. You get to save your $500 million resort." Sterling picked up the document, reading it quickly. His eyes widened as he scanned the terms. "But Mr. Turner," he said, his voice rising, "this demands an upfront payment of $8 million plus 5% of the gross annual revenue of the entire Azure Coast Resort. That is unprecedented. It is the price of the keystone," I said, leaning back against the pillows. "Without my land, you have no resort. Without my land, you have a swamp. So you can either sign that lease and start building your road tomorrow, or you can walk out that door and explain to your investors why their project is dead." Sterling looked at me. He looked at the determination in my eyes. He was a businessman. He knew when he was beaten. He pulled a gold pen from his pocket. "Where do I sign?" he asked. Jordan watched in horror as Sterling signed the document. He watched as I took the pen, my hand steady and strong, and added my signature next to his. It was done. The deal was sealed. $8 million in cash and 5% of the profits for the next century. It was a legacy that would outlive me. It was a legacy that would ensure no Turner ever had to worry about money again. except for 2 of them. The police officer cleared his throat. "All right, show is over, let us go." He pulled Jordan toward the door. Jordan dug his heels in, fighting against the inevitable. "Dad," he screamed. "Dad, you can't do this. You have $8 million. You can hire me a lawyer. You can pay off the Italians. Please, Dad, I am your flesh and blood. You can't let me rot in prison while you get rich." I looked at him. I really looked at him. I saw the fear, but I also saw the entitlement. He still thought he deserved a piece of the pie. He still thought that after everything he had done, he was owed something. I motioned for the officer to wait 1 second. "Jordan," I said, my voice soft but carrying across the room. He stopped, struggling. He looked at me, hope flaring in his eyes. "Yes, Dad." "I did not sell your mother's land," I said, holding up the lease agreement. "I kept it. Because Turners do not sell their heritage. We build on it." I paused, letting the words sink in. "And as for you," I continued, "you have a new home now. You wanted a place to live, rent-free, didn't you? You wanted to be taken care of. Well, the state penitentiary will feed you, they will clothe you, and they will give you a roof over your head." "No," Jordan whispered, the color draining from his face. "And Jordan," I added, "I hear the rats in there are very big." Mackenzie started screaming again, cursing me, cursing Jordan, cursing the world. The officers didn't wait any longer. They dragged them out the door. I watched my son's shoes dragging on the floor, the expensive Italian leather scuffing against the cheap hospital tile. The door closed, cutting off their screams. Silence returned to the room. But it wasn't the lonely silence of the cabin. It was the silence of victory. Mr. Sterling stood up, holding his copy of the lease. He looked at me with a newfound respect. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Turner," he said. I nodded. "The pleasure is mine." He left. Mr. Abernathy smiled at me, closing his laptop. "You did it, Quincy," he said. "Etta would be proud." I looked out the window at the city skyline. I touched the spot on my thumb where the ink stain used to be. I had scrubbed it clean. "I am not done yet," I said. "We have $8 million, Abernathy, and I know exactly what I want to do with the first check." "What is that?" Abernathy asked. "I want to buy a new door for the cabin," I said. "A steel one. Fireproof." And then I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a week, I slept. Really slept. Because the monsters were gone, and the castle was safe. The check was lying on the mahogany desk in front of me. $2.1 million. It was an obscene amount of money to spend on a mistake I did not make. Mr. Abernathy sat across from me, tapping his pen against his chin, watching me struggle with the decision. This was the tax debt for the Villa Rosa in Tuscany, the debt that had turned my son into a criminal, the debt that had driven him to try and burn me alive. If I did not pay it, the Italian government would continue their extradition process. They would drag Jordan out of his American prison cell and fly him to Rome, where he would rot in a foreign jail for tax evasion. He would be thousands of miles away from everyone he knew. He would be alone in a country where he did not speak the language. If I paid it, the international warrant would be lifted. Jordan would stay here in the state penitentiary, serving his 20 years for arson and attempted murder. He would be close enough for me to visit if I ever found the strength to look at him again. "Quincy," Mr. Abernathy said softly, "you do not have to do this. He tried to kill you. Let the Italians have him. It would save you $2 million. I picked up the pen. My hand felt heavy. I thought about the little boy I used to carry on my shoulders. I thought about the man he had become. I could not save his soul. That was already lost. But I could save him from total exile. It was the last act of a father who still remembered the good days, even if they were buried under ashes. "I am not doing it for him," I said, signing the check with a flourish. "I am doing it for the name Turner. We pay our debts, Abernathy, even the ones we did not incur." I handed the check to the lawyer. "Wire the funds," I said. "Clear the debt with the Italian ministry. But Abernathy, make sure you follow the second part of my instructions." Abernathy nodded, his eyes gleaming with understanding. "Of course. We pay the taxes, but we do not pay the mortgage or the maintenance fees." "Exactly," I said, leaning back in my chair. By paying the taxes, I was keeping Jordan in America, but by refusing to pay the other costs associated with the villa, I was ensuring that the bank would foreclose on it within the month. The Villa Rosa, the dream that had started this nightmare, would be seized by the Italian bank. It would be sold at auction to some other dreamer. "When Jordan walks out of prison in 20 years, I said, staring at the wall, "he will have nothing, no villa, no inheritance, No wife. He will be a middle-aged man with empty pockets and a criminal record. He will have to start from zero just like I did. It is a hard lesson, Abernathy said, putting the check in his briefcase. It is the only lesson he will understand, I replied. I am giving him a clean slate, Abernathy. I am just making sure it is a blank one. I stood up and walked to the window of the law office. I watched the city traffic below. I had cleaned up the mess in Europe. Now it was time to build something beautiful right here at home. The next stop was Blackwater Bay. The burnt shell of the cabin had been cleared away. The smell of smoke was gone, replaced by the smell of wet earth and potential. I parked my new truck, a sleek black pickup that rode like a luxury sedan next to a rusted Ford Econoline van. Leo was sitting on the hood of his van strumming a guitar. He looked up when I arrived, his dreadlocks swaying in the breeze. He smiled, that big, easy smile that had become my anchor in the storm. "Hey, Mr. Quincy," he called out. "The crew said they are ready to pour the foundation tomorrow. They are just waiting for your final approval on the blueprints." I walked over to him. I did not look at the construction site. I looked at the young man who had pulled me out of the fire, the young man who had stood up to Omnicorp when my own family would not. "We will get to the blueprints in a minute, Leo," I said. "First, I have something for you." I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope. It was not a check this time. It was a deed and a bank draft. Leo wiped his hands on his jeans. "What is this, Mr. Quincy? Am I being fired?" I laughed. "You are not being fired, son. You are being promoted." He opened the envelope. He pulled out the papers. He read the first line and stopped. He read the number on the bank draft, and his guitar slid off his lap, hitting the ground with a twang. $500,000, he whispered. His voice cracked. "Mr. Quincy, I cannot take this." "And look at the other paper," I said, pointing to the deed. He looked. It was the deed to the plot of land next to mine, the plot where his van was currently parked. I had bought it from the county that morning. "You cannot live in a van forever, Leo," I said. "You need a home. You need a headquarters for that security business you are always talking about starting. Consider this your seed capital." Leo looked at me. Tears welled up in his eyes. He shook his head slowly. "I didn't help you for money, Mr. Quincy. I helped you because it was right. I know," I said, putting my hand on his shoulder. "And that is exactly why you deserve it. Loyalty is rare, Leo. It is the most valuable currency in the world. You saved my life. You saved my legacy. $500,000 is a bargain." He dropped the papers and hugged me. It was a bear hug, tight and genuine. He smelled of rain and cheap cologne and gratitude. I hugged him back, feeling the strength of a son I had chosen, not one I was born with. "Now dry your eyes," I said, pulling away. "We have work to do. I do not want just a house, Leo. I want a fortress." We walked over to the construction foreman. I unrolled the blueprints. I had designed them myself during my sleepless nights in the hospital. I was a structural engineer, and this was going to be my masterpiece. "No more wood," I told the foreman, pointing to the plans. "I want steel beams, I want reinforced concrete, and I want glass." "Glass?" the foreman asked, looking skeptical. "Mr. Turner, we are right on the coast. The storms here are brutal. I want impact-resistant architectural glass," I said firmly. "Floor to ceiling. I want to see everything. I want to see the storms coming. I want to see the sun rising. I want a house that has no dark corners for secrets to hide in." We spent the next 6 months building it. It rose from the ashes of the old cabin like a diamond rising from the mud. It was a modern marvel of sharp angles and transparent walls. The entire front facade was glass looking out over the bay. The back was solid concrete anchored deep into the bedrock. When it was finished, it did not look like a cabin. It looked like a temple to truth. I stood in the center of the living room on the day we finished. The floor was polished concrete heated from below. The furniture was minimal and modern. The art Etta had collected, which had been safe in the bunker during the fire, was now displayed proudly on the walls. I walked to the massive glass wall. I pressed my hand against it. It was cool and solid. I looked out at the water. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, just like it had on the day I arrived. But I was not the same man who had broken down that door with a crowbar. I poured myself a glass of the 1982 Bordeaux. I walked over to the fireplace, which was now a sleek gas ribbon of fire encased in stone. Above the mantel hung a large portrait of Etta. It was the one I had kept on my bedside table, the one I had saved from the fire. I raised my glass to her. "You knew, didn't you?" I whispered to the painting. Her eyes seemed to twinkle in the firelight. "You knew that if you just left me the money, I would have been weak. I would have given it to Jordan. I would have let him bully me. I would have let him guilt me into signing it away." I took a sip of the wine. It tasted of victory. "You gave me a ruin because you knew I liked to fix things. But you didn't want me to fix the house, Etta. You wanted me to fix myself." I walked around the room feeling her presence in every beam, in every bolt. "You forced me to fight," I said, my voice growing stronger. "You stripped everything away from me, my home, my comfort, my illusions about our son. You put me in the mud and told me to survive." I looked down at the floor where the bunker hatch used to be. It was now covered by a beautiful rug, but I knew it was there, the heart of the house. "You wanted me to find my backbone, Etta. And you were right. It was buried deep under layers of being a nice guy, being a provider, being a pushover." I laughed softly, a sound of pure joy. "Well, I found it, Etta. I found the steel inside me, and I built a house to match it. I walked out onto the deck. The air was salty and fresh. Down the beach I could see the lights of the new resort construction. The road was being paved on my land. Every truck that drove over it put money into my pocket. Every guest that would check in would be contributing to the Turner legacy. Leo was down on his property measuring the foundation for his new house. He waved at me. I waved back. I was 68 years old. I was a widower. My son was in prison. By all accounts, I should have been a broken man. But as I stood there watching the ocean crash against the shore, I felt younger than I had in 20 years. I had walked through the fire. I had faced the betrayal. And I had come out the other side, not just alive, but reborn. The rats were gone. The snakes were locked away. And the lion was finally home. This isn't just a story about money or revenge. It is a story about waking up. Sometimes life has to burn your house down to show you that you were living in a cage. And sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones holding the matches. I took one last look at the stars reflecting in the glass walls of my fortress. "Good night, Etta," I whispered. "And thank you." I turned off the lights not because I was afraid of the dark, but because I no longer needed to hide from it. The game was over. And for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to tomorrow. Time is a strange architect. It builds empires in a day and crumbles mountains over centuries, but sometimes, if you are very lucky, it takes a single year to rewrite an entire life. I sat on the expansive teak deck of my new home, watching the sun dip below the horizon, turning the waters of Blackwater Bay into a sheet of hammered copper. In my hand was a crystal glass filled with a Cabernet that cost more than my first car. The liquid was dark and rich, swirling against the sides of the glass as I breathed in the salty air. 1 year ago, I sat on a rotting porch in the rain, shivering and broke, waiting for the rats to come out. Today, I sat in an architectural marvel of steel and impact-resistant glass that hovered above the bedrock like a spaceship. I looked to my left. The Azure Coast Resort was fully operational. It was a sprawling complex of white stone and blue pools teeming with wealthy tourists from all over the world. I watched the luxury cars line up at the valet stand. I watched the delivery trucks rumble down the paved 4-lane highway that cut through the edge of my property. Every single car that drove down that road put money in my pocket. Every guest that ordered a cocktail at the resort bar was paying a dividend to the Turner estate. The 5% stake I held in the resort had turned out to be more lucrative than even Mr. Abernathy had predicted. The quarterly checks were astronomical. I had enough money to buy a villa in Italy every month if I wanted to, but I had no desire to leave this spot. This land was not just dirt anymore. It was victory. I took a sip of the wine, letting the tannins settle on my tongue. The air conditioning hummed silently behind me, keeping the interior of my glass fortress at a perfect 70 degrees. I wore a linen shirt and comfortable trousers, the kind of clothes a man wears when he has nothing to prove and nowhere to be. I was 69 years old now, but my arthritis seemed to have vanished along with my poverty. Perhaps stress was the real poison all along, and now that the poison was gone, my body was finally healing. I watched a yacht pull into the resort marina. It was sleek and white, shining in the twilight. I raised my glass to it. "Enjoy your stay," I whispered. "Thank you for your contribution to my retirement fund." It felt good to be the landlord. It felt good to be the one holding the keys. Etta was right. She was always right. The best view is not from the cheap seats, it is from the castle you build yourself. My phone buzzed on the side table, but I ignored it. It was probably Mr. Sterling inviting me to another board dinner or a gala opening. I went to those sometimes just to see the fear in his eyes when he shook my hand. He respected me now. He feared me. And that was better than being liked. I was no longer the crazy old man in the swamp. I was Mr. Turner, the silent partner, the man who could shut down their main access road with a single legal injunction if they ever missed a payment. I heard footsteps on the gravel path below. It was the mail carrier. He waved up at me. He knew who I was. Everyone in town knew who I was now. "Special delivery, Mr. Turner," he called out, placing a bundle of letters in the sleek metal box at the bottom of the stairs. I waited until he drove away before I walked down. I knew what day it was. It was the first of the month. And the first of the month always brought a specific kind of letter. I picked up the mail. Most of it was junk or investment offers from bankers who wanted to manage my millions. But at the bottom of the stack was a plain white envelope. The return address was stamped in red ink. State Correctional Facility, Department of Corrections, inmate mail. I walked back up the stairs, my legs feeling strong. I sat back down in my chair and stared at the envelope. The handwriting was shaky, barely recognizable as the script of the arrogant man who used to sign checks with a flourish. It was Jordan. I tore open the envelope. The letter was written on cheap-lined paper with a dull pencil. I unfolded it, smoothing out the creases. "Dear Dad," it began. "I hope this letter finds you well. I hope the house is finished. I saw a picture of the resort in a magazine someone left in the common room. It looks beautiful. I bet your view is amazing." I paused, taking a sip of wine. He was trying to be polite. He was trying to charm me. It was pathetic. "Things here are hard, Dad," the letter continued. "The food is terrible. It is mostly starch and mystery meat. I have lost 20 pounds, and it is cold. The blankets they give us are thin. I have a cough that won't go away." I read the words without feeling a single pang of sympathy. I remembered the cold rain on the night he kicked me out. I remembered the heat of the fire he lit. Cold was a mercy compared to what he had planned for me. "I need a favor, Dad," he wrote. "I know I do not deserve it, but please. I need money for the commissary. I need to buy soap and toothpaste, and maybe some ramen noodles. The other guys have money on their books. It makes things safer if you can buy things, just a few $100s. Please, Dad, you have millions now. It is nothing to you." I turned the page. "And Dad, have you heard from Mackenzie? She served me with divorce papers last week. Her lawyer says she is suing everyone. She is suing the state for emotional distress. She is suing the match company for making a defective product. She is even trying to sue you for entrapment. She is crazy, Dad. I am glad she is gone. She was the one who made me do it. You know that, right? It was all her idea." I laughed out loud. A dry, harsh sound that startled a seagull perched on the railing. Even in prison, even after a year, he was still blaming everyone else. It was Mackenzie's fault. It was the match's fault. It was never Jordan's fault. He hadn't learned a thing. He was just a smaller, poorer version of the monster he had always been. "I am sorry, Dad," he finished. "Please send the money. I am scared in here. Love, Jordan." I looked at the signature. It was weak. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my heavy gold lighter. It was a gift from Leo for my birthday. I flicked the wheel and a tall, strong flame sprang to life, dancing in the evening breeze. I held the corner of the letter to the flame. The paper caught, instantly curling and blackening as the fire consumed the words. I watched the blue lines disappear. I watched the pleas for money turn to ash. I watched the lies about love vanish into smoke. I held it until the heat reached my fingertips. Then I dropped the burning paper into the heavy stone ashtray on the table. I watched it burn until it was nothing but a pile of gray dust. "No, Jordan," I whispered to the ashes. "You do not get commissary money. You do not get ramen noodles. You get the consequences of your actions. You wanted a free ride your whole life. Well, you have one now. The state is taking care of you just like you wanted." I brushed the ash off my hands. I did not feel guilty. I felt clean. I had severed the limb to save the body, and now the wound was fully healed. Mackenzie could sue the wind for all I cared. Jordan could beg the walls for mercy. They were ghosts to me now, fading memories of a bad dream that I had finally woken up from. A horn honked from the driveway. I looked down. A white security truck with amber lights on the roof was pulling in. The logo on the door read Lion Security Services in bold gold letters. Leo jumped out of the driver's seat. He was wearing a sharp uniform that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. His dreadlocks were tied back neatly. He looked like a professional. He looked like a man with a purpose. He walked up the stairs, taking them two at a time. He was carrying a file folder and a box of pastries from the best bakery in the city. "Evening, Mr. Quincy," he said, flashing that bright smile. "Just finished the perimeter check on the resort. Everything is quiet, and I brought you those lemon tarts you like." I smiled back. "Thank you, Leo. You are working too hard, son. Sit down, have a glass of wine with me." "I cannot stay long," he said, sitting on the edge of the chair. "I have a date tonight. A nice girl from the university. I am taking her to that Italian place downtown." I chuckled. "Good for you, Leo. Treat her right." "I will," he said. He looked at the ashtray. He saw the fresh pile of ash. He looked at me, his eyes full of understanding. "Another letter?" he asked softly. I nodded. "Another letter." "Did you read it?" Leo asked. "I read enough," I said. "He is hungry. He is cold. He is sorry." Leo nodded slowly. "They are always sorry when the cage door closes." He reached out and poured a little more wine into my glass. "You did the right thing, Mr. Quincy," Leo said. "You gave him a choice a long time ago. He made it. Now you are just letting him live with it." I looked at Leo. This young man who had lived in a van a year ago was now running a successful company. He was employing 10 people. He was building a life with honor and hard work. He was the son I should have had. And in a way, he was the son I had earned. "I am not worried about him, Leo," I said. "I am just cleaning up the dust." We sat there for a while, watching the stars come out over the ocean. The resort lights twinkled below us like a second galaxy. I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't just the money. Money is just paper. It was the dignity. It was the knowledge that I had stood my ground when the world tried to push me down. I thought about Etta. I thought about the woman who had played the longest game of chess in history just to save me. I raised my glass to the night sky. "The rats are gone, Etta," I whispered. Leo raised his water glass. "And the snakes are in the cage," he added. I smiled, drinking the expensive wine. "The rats are gone." I repeated, my voice strong and clear, echoing off the glass walls of my fortress. "And now only the lions remain." I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sweet air of freedom. Tomorrow I would go down to the resort and inspect the new expansion. Tomorrow I would have lunch with Mr. Abernathy. Tomorrow I would live. This story, my friends, is not about revenge. Revenge is for the weak. This is a story about justice. It is a story about knowing your worth when everyone else tells you that you are worthless. It is about building a castle out of the stones they threw at you. Thank you for listening to my journey. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to cut toxic family out of your life to save yourself? I read every single comment. Until next time, keep your head up, keep your eyes open, and never let anyone take your key. I am Quincy Turner, and I am finally home. This journey taught me the hardest lesson a parent can ever learn, which is that you cannot save someone who is determined to drown. For years, I confused enabling with loving, thinking I could fix Jordan's greed with patience. But I learned that family is not defined by DNA. It is defined by loyalty and respect. It is better to be alone in a fortress of peace than surrounded by family in a house of lies. You are never too old to start over, and you are never too weak to demand the respect you deserve. Sometimes you have to let go of the hand that is holding you down so you can finally breathe again. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us share more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Jordan, or did I do the right thing? I want to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay strong.